till dawn. Hear the engine roar out loud. We're gonna scream and shout, 'cause that's what we're all about. Singing, what are you waiting for? Let's go, yeah. What are you waiting for? Let's go, yeah. Floor the gas, forget the cops. We'll be screaming now. Gonna speed on till tomorrow, we won't stop. Go a better way. Running through, go coast to coast. Running coast to coast. Then we'll drive right through it, ride or die. We'll see it all. What are you waiting for? Let's go, yeah. What are you waiting for? Let's go, yeah. Come on. What are you waiting for? Let's go, yeah.
All right. Hey, welcome everybody. Welcome. Thank you to Triple Scoop Music for the great intro music. And by the way, those were all Gary Hershorn's pictures that you guys were looking at while we were waiting to get the show started. So I just want to, if somebody on YouTube could actually just in the comments, just let me know that you are hearing audio. That would be great. And we're going to get started here in just a second. Hey, Robert Giroux, I see you on, buddy. So I think everything looks pretty good here. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So, hey, everybody. Whoop, microphone. Hey, everybody, welcome. This is The Real Picture, and I'm your host, Greg Gibson. We have another great show for you guys today, coming right on the heels of that awesome show that we did with New York Times photographer Doug Mills just 2 days ago on Wednesday. Today, we've got another one of my old friends. We have Gary Hershorn, who is a former Reuters photographer, now is a Fox News photo editor. Gary has been documenting the New York City skyline, been documenting New York City and the Manhattan skyline since 2011. And when I say documenting, I mean like crazy, amazing, jaw-dropping images that just like blow your mind. So just when you think he can't outdo himself anymore, he comes up with another image that just blows you away. So I'm really looking forward to bringing Gary on and talking about that. So I'll bring him on in just a second. But as usual, we do have a couple of announcements, a little bit of housekeeping to do. And I think you guys are going to want to listen to these announcements because I do have a little bit of info on some shows that we're going to do next week. So first of all, the last show with Doug Mills was a huge success. Everybody really enjoyed the virtual tour of the White House briefing room and seeing how he positions his cameras. So if you guys weren't able to catch that live, you really do need to go back and check that video out. The behind the scenes tour of the White House briefing room was really amazing. And it's something that a lot of people don't get to see. So it's really unusual and really good content. And as a result of that show, there were a lot of questions about how Doug sets up and fires his remote cameras. So Doug has very generously agreed to come back on early next week, and he is going to do a show from inside the briefing room again to show you guys just how he configures and wires up those remote cameras, how he sets them up, and then how he fires them. And he'll also go into a little bit more detail on his near real-time image transfer and delivery process and how he gets those images out to the New York Times on deadline. So I'm sort of thinking that that's going to happen next Tuesday, but we haven't actually confirmed the date yet, so stay tuned, as they say. I also have a Facebook page. Let me see if I can bring the title up here. I have a Facebook page now, and you guys can take a look there for updates, and certainly we'll be blasting out all that information as soon as it's confirmed. So the other announcement I have is that I'm also going to be bringing on my old buddy Matt Mendelson at some point next week to talk about his new senior portrait project, Not Forgotten, the Yorktown High School Seniors of 2020. Now, I know some of you guys are out there, you're rolling your eyes because you're thinking this is just going to be another one of those porch portraits that everybody's doing these days. Well, it sort of is, but it's a little bit different. And just knowing Matt, it's going to be different. So Matt is doing this project really as a photojournalist and a storyteller, and not so much as just a straight up portrait photographer. And what he's trying to do is he's trying to convey the sense of loss that all these high school kids feel about not being able to have graduation or the prom or not being able to defend their state soccer championship. So Matt goes out and he finds something that's unique and special about each one of those kids, and he's telling their individual story in pictures. And speaking of each one of those kids, there are 500 seniors at this high school, and he intends to photograph every single one of them. And he's gotten a lot of media attention on this project, from the Washington Post to local TV to CBS This Morning even. And so we're going to look forward to talking to him about that project. So as I mentioned, the last show with Doug was a huge hit. And as a result, the subscriber count on the channel did go up substantially. But we still need to significantly increase the subscriber count here. So if you like what you're seeing, please hit the subscribe button, give us some likes, leave some comments. My next goal is for us to hit 1,000 subscribers. So I'm asking all of you guys to get the word out. Please share what we're doing. when the subscriber goes up, when the subscriber count goes up, good things happen here. So primarily what happens is our content gets ranked a lot higher in the search engine. So it just makes everything we're doing easier to find. But it also helps me because it gets me closer to being able to monetize this channel and offset some of the costs that I've incurred to start it up. So yeah, believe it or not, I have spent a little bit of money to kind of get this thing going. So again, please hit the subscribe button, give us some likes, and please leave us some comments. We really do enjoy the engagement, and hearing from you and all that stuff is really what makes doing this so worthwhile. So, okay, that's pretty much all the housekeeping stuff I have for today. So I'm going to bring on today's guest. So let me just bring up the one and only Gary Hershorn. Hey, Gary, welcome, buddy. Welcome. Glad to have you here.
Thank you, Greg. Very happy to be here talking to you.
Now, as I understand it, Gary started photographing New York City, the New York City skyline, back in 2011 as part of the 10th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. And since that time, is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly where it started.
And since that time, photographing the city has really sort of become an obsession and a passion project for him. His Instagram feed is a must follow. Let me see. I have your Instagram on here somewhere. Well, let me get you up there where we can see it. So his Instagram feed is a must follow. It has some of the most dramatic images of the Manhattan skyline that have ever been created, from bold sunsets to blood moons to colorful rainbows and the snap and crackle of lightning. Gary has really managed to capture the New York landscape in every way imaginable. And like I said earlier, you'll see a picture come up sometimes that you think is probably the best thing you've seen. And then a few days later, he posts another one that's even better. Just the quantity and the volume of content that he produces week in, week out is just unbelievable. So Gary is also a former news photographer. He worked for Reuters here in the Washington, D.C. area. He was actually one of my competitors. And I think I have a picture here somewhere. I think this was from, I think President Clinton went down to Louisiana at some point and was doing like inspecting hurricane damage down on the coast somewhere, and and we were stuck in the back of these pickups. Those were our motorcade vehicles, so we were in the back of these pickups, and it was pouring rain on us. So this is just something Gary and I were stuck together doing.
Drowned rats.
We were drowned rats. We sure were. It was soggy the whole day. Like that's how the day started off. And then once you get wet, you're wet the whole time. And so, you know, that flight back to Washington on the airplane and the air conditioning was not particularly pleasant.
Yeah.
But as I said, Gary was one of my competitors. Oh, hang on. I lost my space in my notes here. So Gary was one of my competitors, you know, working here for Reuters. And so one of the things I wanted to tell you guys about was Gary gave me one of the biggest ass whoopings I've ever had in my career as a news photographer. So I thought I would just embarrass him by starting off telling that story. So we were covering the funeral for Jackie Kennedy back in 1994, I think it was. And Gary and I were actually the only two news photographers that were actually allowed reasonably close to the gravesite in Arlington Cemetery. And when I say close, I mean, we were like way up on a hill behind the gravesite. We were shooting with 400 millimeter 2.8 lenses. And, you know, so we were still a pretty good distance away, you know, up on this hill. So everything was going pretty good, and I'm getting really good pictures. And I think I've got it covered. You know, I've got the family is kneeling around the casket. I've got Caroline, JFK Jr., Teddy, all really good stuff. Now, you have to keep in mind in 1994, we were, for the most part, we had been doing some digital back then, but we were still pretty much, for the most part, shooting 36 exposure rolls of film. And so sort of towards the end of it, I looked down at my camera and I checked my frame count, and I was on about frame number 24, and I thought, okay, I'm good to go. I don't really need to change my film here yet. Well, things dragged on a little bit, and, you know, I'm trying to conserve because I know I've only got like 12 frames left on the camera. So there's a click here and a click there, and here's another hug, and I got to make another click. But finally, you know, they all start to head off for the car, and I think I've got everything pretty covered, and I feel pretty good about what I've got. Well, then what happens is JFK Jr. got back out of the car and starts walking back towards his father's grave. And so I put my camera up to my eye and I started to push the button and nothing happened. I am freaking out of film. I have no more film left. I'm like on frame 37. Nothing happens. And so, I had another camera with me. I had another camera with a 300 millimeter lens on it. So I picked that camera up and I put that to my eye, but I don't quite get it in focus. I knew I didn't nail the focus on it. And so, but what happens is JFK Jr. walks up to his father's grave and he touches his hand to his mouth like this. And then he reaches down and he places a kiss on the headstone. And I'm like, oh my God. I think, well, I know it's not quite sharp, but I know I have the moment. So, at least I got the moment. So we'll get something out of it. And you have to keep in mind, so in 1994, we weren't really doing a lot of autofocus back then. So I was manually focusing the camera and I just missed it. And so I go back into the office and we process the film and nope, it just wasn't quite there. It wasn't quite usable. So the next day I do get a lot of play with the pictures of the family gathered around the gravesite. I've got front pages around the country, with Caroline and John and Teddy all kneeling around the coffin. But the New York Times runs Gary Hershorn's picture of JFK Jr. placing the kiss on the headstone. And it also shows up inside a few other newspapers around the world. And so, well, pretty soon I get a call from the executive photo editor in New York, whose name I'm not going to mention because he's not one of my favorite people, who then proceeds to ream me a big new one and tells me that I missed the picture of the decade.
No kidding.
So, and he keeps telling me, how can a professional photographer run out of film during a moment like that? So, needless to say, I was in the doghouse for a pretty good while after that. And fortunately for me, that picture it was a good picture, Gary, but it wasn't quite the picture of the decade. But you did whip my ass with it. And anyway, I've never forgot that one. Hey, you did what
6 years later, I can apologize to you.
Well, one other thing I should mention before we kind of jump into everything here is Gary also has published a book of his images called New York Celestial. So there's a picture of the book, and I just wanted to show you guys here. I do have my own copy of it, and I actually paid extra, and I got the Gary Hershorn signature edition. So you guys can find this on
to Washington.
Yeah, so you guys can
drive it for you.
Please do. But you guys can find this book on Amazon, and I have the link to it is in the show notes in the description here on YouTube. So Gary.
Yes.
Welcome. So
thank you.
Tell us a little bit about how you kind of started down this path.
Well, it really was the summer of 2011, and it was like June, July, August, months leading up to the 10th anniversary of 9/11, and the world was just going crazy for pictures of New York City. I remember that summer, everybody was just like trying to outshoot each other, shooting with wide lux cameras. People were doing black and white. Anything went. Filters in Instagram, or not Instagram, but back then it was Hipstamatic on iPhones. That started the filter thing. And everybody was trying to come up with something a little different. And I was shooting with a mobile phone at the time with a Polaroid filter on it. And we were putting those pictures out as a package. And it was really, by walking up and down the Hudson River. Most of the stuff that I shot was where I do now. I live in Hoboken. And I was walking up and down the Hudson River from anywhere from Bayonne to Weehawken, New Jersey, looking for pictures that showed Ground Zero in 2011. And it was in 2011 that One World Trade Center started to come up out of the ground. So, New York was pretty dormant and really not much going on between the attack and the 10th anniversary. And there was a real feeling of a rejuvenation going on in New York City at the time. in that summer, and that's when I started. I started seeing the beauty of the city from across the Hudson River.
Let's I'm gonna start some of the images here.
Yeah, so that picture was taken the night before. That was September 10th, 2011. They tested the lights the night before, and it's shot from Bayonne. And you can see the One World Trade Center is about half done there, maybe a third. And they lit it with the red, white, and blue. And it was just you know, a really nice. For me, it was just a really nice time to start looking at the city in a way that I never did. And I had been living in New York since 2005, and I hadn't really shot much of this stuff up to that point. But when I look at this picture, I think of how flat the skyline looks compared to what it is today.
Oh yeah, for sure.
The Empire State Building is got buildings all around it now, and it's just such a different feel. And that's only, 2000. It's 9 years ago.
Yeah.
Not that long ago when you consider, how long it took to build New York City.
Right, and One World Trade is there now.
Yeah, it's all the way up. And so this picture, everybody asked me when I got started with the moon, when I was interested in the moon. This was in May of 2012, and it was the first time I had ever heard the term supermoon. And there was all these stories in the press about, oh, there's going to be a supermoon on this night, and I thought, okay, I had started. This was 2012, May 2012. I'd started using an app back then that kind of positioned you in the place to be, and I figured out that there was a spot 13 miles away from New York with an observation deck that looked out at the city, and this was the supermoon in May of 2012, and you can see One World Trade Center still under construction there. It's getting up higher, but it's not near done. And I was so overwhelmed by the color and size of the moon taken from a long distance away from Manhattan. It was like, I got to do this every month now. And I kind of haven't stopped since.
Well, so, we didn't get into so just to let everybody know, we're going to, the outline we're going to do for the show kind of is we're going to talk about some of Gary's favorite images here. And then we're going to jump into some of the images that he shot recently and talk about how what he does has changed a bit since the COVID-19 crisis has struck. And then after we go through those, then we're going to come back and Gary's going to talk a little bit about how he positions himself, how he finds the locations, and he's going to talk in great detail about the post-production, the in-depth post-production work that he does, because I know you guys are going to have questions about that. But let's talk a little bit just about real quickly about equipment. So what cameras, lenses are you using for the most part? Like, for example, this lens to me looks like it's got a lot of compression in it. So are you shooting a really long lens here?
Right. Almost all the moons that I shoot are super telephotos. 600 to 800 millimeters is kind of my target.
That makes you unique. That makes you unique among Instagrammers, I think. I don't know that a lot of Instagrammers are carrying lugging around 600 millimeter lenses.
Nor am I. I'm carrying around a 300 f4 or a 400 5.6, and I use a Canon M5 mirrorless camera that has a 1-inch sensor in it. And when you put a regular Canon EF lens on it, you get an almost doubling factor.
Right. So the smaller sensor is about 2 times, like having a 2x teleconverter on the lens. So that 300 millimeter does sort of. It has the crop effect. It's not actually, you're not actually getting more compression. You're just getting more crop on the image.
Correct. And these 1-inch sensors have such high quality now. It's really, perfect for what I do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So I use that camera a lot for these. This is taken from same place, 13 miles away. And I use that camera with these, with, like I say, the 300 and 400. And a lot of my stuff within the city, a lot of the wide angle stuff is shot with a Canon PowerShot camera, G7X.
Wow.
I
would think most people out there are probably thinking that you're shooting with the 1DX or, at least one of the higher megapixel. I'm not familiar with the Canon gear as much anymore, but I think the 5Ds have the higher megapixel count. So I've got to think everybody thinks you're shooting the super high end cameras.
No, I'm shooting the super low end amateur cameras. And two things that when I think about buying a camera these days, two things that are really important to me. And one is the flip screen. I never use a viewfinder. I always use the monitor on the back so I can put it on the ground a lot, which I do. And the other thing is the camera has to have Wi-Fi so you can send a picture over to your phone for posting.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
So lightning is one of my favorites, and
this is another one of those pictures. Like you look at those two moon pictures and you think, "Holy crap! How can Gary come up with something to top that?" And then here's this frigging lightning picture with the lightning is touching the rod on top of the Empire State Building. This is insane.
That storm was particularly good. That night there were 21 strikes of the tower.
Wow!
And I got 17. I got 17 of the 21 strikes. And lightning is again, one of my favorite things to tell everybody is all the pictures that you see here are not random. None of this is a found situation. None of this is about being in the right place at the right time. Every picture that I go out to take, I'm going out to take this picture. I know there's a lightning storm coming because I have a weather app, a radar app that has up to the second lightning. Radar and lightning. And so I can see the storms blow into New York and know which ones to chase for lightning and which ones not. And it's really important to know the technology that is out there that you can use as a photographer to one, put you in the right place to shoot the picture that you want to shoot. And two, the apps and the technology shorten the amount of time you need to be actually out shooting this stuff. The moon rises at 7:10. It doesn't come early, it doesn't come later. It comes up at 7:10. So you don't have to spend a whole lot of time out there to do it.
Hang on one second. This thing wanting to go into slideshow mode. All right.
Well, I can talk about this picture for a second. Let's
back up because we missed one. All right.
Yeah. That's from Bayonne, New Jersey. This picture, a lot of Instagrammers and myself, we shoot this picture a lot because it just looks great when you put the Statue of Liberty next to the Empire State Building. But I can tell you that there's no picture that anybody or I put on Instagram or on Twitter or social media that elicits more comments about a fake photo than this one, because nobody can understand how the Statue of Liberty can be located in Midtown Manhattan to be so close. So everybody thinks this is a fake, and this is just a 600 millimeter lens from a pier in Bayonne, and that's the alignment. That's the beautiful alignment. And
that's what you get with compression.
There.
Yeah.
With compression, you just bring them all together, and it's beautiful at sunrise. This is a sunrise picture, and it's just beautiful at sunrise there at certain times of the year. Like everything, you're chasing the light, right?
Exactly. I love that directional. I love the directional light, that hard side light. That's one of my favorite types of light to shoot in.
Yeah, I think if you look at the pictures, you can. I always think it's like a love affair with light in New York, and you have to know where the light is, and you have to know where the positioning is. You have to know where to go to get the light coming from the side or from the front, or if you want it from the back. Again, the apps will help you do that. Yeah, this picture is so orange. This happened to be a sunrise, right before sunrise. You can see a moon's coming up. I went out for that, but it was early on a Sunday morning, and it just so happened that there were, I think it was last summer, there were forest fires burning in New Jersey. And when I went out that morning, the atmosphere smelled like fire. It was all blowing in from Jersey. So all that muted tone of orange is all from smoke in the air that day. It's not something that you'll get every day of the week in New York City.
Wow. And where did you say the smoke was coming from?
It was there was forest fires kind of in southern New Jersey.
Wow.
Or brush fires, and it was blowing up the coast and into New York that morning. And there was a distinct smell of fire in the air that day.
Wow.
It's just before sunrise, yeah.
Wow, this is a gorgeous, gorgeous image. I just love, So Gary came to Washington as a sports photographer. I mean, that's where he really cut his teeth, was as sports photographer for Reuters and in Canada. And, you know, he was Mr. Hockey, of course, being from Canada. But Gary really cut his teeth as a sports photographer. So you really see sort of that, you know, all sports photographers are comfortable and familiar with long lenses. And I think you really kind of see that in his work, you know, the use of the lens compression. I always said that, you know, if you can shoot sports, you can pretty much shoot anything. And I think, you know, again, like Doug Mills, who we just had on, you know, he's a big sports photographer. And I think that really helps Doug to be able to shoot anything. And I certainly am seeing that in your images as well, Gary.
Oh, absolutely. You know, timing is everything, even when you're shooting landscapes, I think. Get the bird just right? You know?
Exactly, yeah.
But you mentioned that, it's funny, you know, when I worked at Reuters and when I worked in the wires, I never paid any attention to light. You know, as a trained news photographer, you're trained to photograph whatever it is you have to photograph in the light that's presenting itself, whether it's an indoor arena or a stadium or just whatever, a press conference. You just work with whatever light you have. And, you know, stepping outside and seeing what Mother Nature offers up, it's a whole new dimension in being a photographer, you know. And I never shot this stuff. I never looked for the features. I remember a few years ago, Larry Rubenstein, our great friend, you know, from Reuters and UPI, saying to me, "Where the heck were these pictures when you worked here?" You know, and who knew you had that in you when you worked here? And you know, my comment was, there was no place for these pictures on the wire when we were, you know, back in the 80s and 90s. There were no online photo galleries, and there weren't, you know, large spreads in newspapers with this kind of stuff. And
Exactly.
so nobody shot it. It had no place. And now everybody wants to see these pictures. They're everywhere because they stand out, you know, from the daily grind of news photography, whether it's from the White House or sports or something. This brightens up a pictures of the day gallery.
Well, I think a lot of people, and again, we're not really going to get into very much post-production for this part, but I think a lot of people, you know, probably think that you're adding these colors and everything, you know, these hyper-saturated images in post. And again, I don't want to get too much detail about that now, but because we'll talk about it later. But
right, yeah, no, not that's, you know, the color's not added. Mother Nature just serves that up, and you just have to be out there to get it.
Wow, this is another striking image.
Thank you. This was the eclipse. Everybody, you know, traveled down south in this area. Everybody went down to North Carolina to get the total eclipse of the sun. And I knew I wanted to take this picture. I would have loved to have gone somewhere in the country to shoot the black dot in the sky, you know, that everybody was doing. But I wanted to shoot this picture for the book. It was really important to me to have something of the eclipse in this book because, you know, getting an eclipse, this was about 73%. That was the maximum. And getting a picture of that over the city, over a landmark in the city, I think was more important to me than trying to get and experience the joy of being in a total eclipse. I'd hate to have gone somewhere and completely missed the eclipse because of clouds, only to find out that if I'd stayed home, there was something to take.
Well, I think that's so true, though. I think the best eclipse images are those pictures that the ones who have a sense of place to them. You know,
right.
Unless you're shooting like this super, like the telescopes where you're getting like that whole sequence of the moon passing over the sun and the corona and all that kind of stuff. Interesting to think of the sun's corona now during this time, but anyway, but yeah, no, I think the best eclipse images are the ones that do have a sense of place. There's something in the landscape. So you know where that you're able to identify where the picture was made.
There's no question. You know, as a photographer, I've never forgotten the words of wisdom from my, you know, good friend Steve Fine, the former director of photography at Sports Illustrated, who talks endlessly about time and place, context, time and place. And you know, when I was shooting, I actually shot this picture with Steve next to me. We were out on Fifth Avenue. You know, the app told me exactly where to be at what time to get this picture. And for the 2 or 3 days prior to this, I was out on Fifth Avenue shooting the sun, trying to test it. I was using an orange filter, and I was trying to make sure everything would work. And then I would go down and see Steve, and we'd talk about the picture, and so we definitely came up with together the best picture I could think of to give New York prominence in the eclipse.
Yeah, and what you say about time and place, it really is so true. I mean, it really applies to any images. And I remember one of the first lessons I learned as a young photographer is like, there was I don't even remember who it was. This was way back in the early days when I was just starting out in the early 80s. And I remember a presidential candidate came through town, and I went out to photograph him, and I was getting like some really nice, expressive headshots. And then my editor looked at the pictures and said, I can get these, nice, tight, expressive headshots anywhere. But what I really need to know is I need to know that he's here in our city. I need to see him with our local politicians. I need to see him with some of our landmarks. I need to know like that he's here in town, because otherwise, if all you're giving me is just these tight headshots with no time and place, he could be anywhere. Right. And so our readers want to know, that he's here.
Absolutely. And Steve was the master of time and place in Sports Illustrated. Their leading off pictures, everything about Sports Illustrated, their double trucks were always that sense of time and place. And I've always thought about that. I didn't originally at the start of my career, but I did definitely later on.
Exactly.
I shot this picture shoulder to shoulder with Jeff Haynes, great photographer in Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
And,
yep.
This was one of the most bitter, cold nights of my life being outside. This was close to 11 o'clock at night on the West Side Highway in New York. And we were out there with about 20 other photographers, all trying to line up the moon on top of the World Trade Center. That was an eclipse, the blood red moon.
Yeah, it's funny. Like everybody has there's this obsession with the moon now, the blood moon, the super blood moon. Who knows what the next one is.
I think it's a flower moon coming up in a couple of weeks. we had a new moon a couple of days ago, so the full moon is coming up around the 6th or 7th of May, and I believe it's the flower moon. So as I've been mentioning a lot lately, the moon is a thing now, and I can't understand why. It's like, as journalists, we're used to advanced stories leading up to the World Series or leading up to the Stanley Cup Finals, or these advanced stories, and these days, every month, there's an advanced story of the name of the moon and where to see it and how to watch it and how to photograph it. So yeah, it's fun to photograph because it gets published around the world in media outlets all over the world the next day.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly much more attention drawn to sort of the astronomical events these days. That's for sure.
Absolutely. So yeah, this is everybody talks about. I'm sure everybody out there has heard about Manhattan Henge.
Oh yeah,
and Manhattan Henge is this phenomenon where on a couple nights, a couple nights in May and a couple nights in July, the setting sun aligns itself perfectly with every street on the grid. So no matter what street you're standing on, whether it's 14th or 34th or 42nd, 57th, you'll see the sun setting at the end of the street. So this is what we call a reverse Manhattan Henge at sunrise. Same thing happens in late November and mid-January. 2 days in late November, 2 days in mid-January, where the sun again lines itself with the grid. And this is the sun shot from Weehawken, New Jersey, across the Hudson River, down 42nd Street.
Wow, it's beautiful.
Yeah. And this is another view of it, a little higher. The last one was at the riverside. And Weehawken has a place up in a place called Hamilton Park that overlooks the river from an elevated position. And this is the different day, but the same effect of Manhattan Henge. And there is the nighttime Manhattan Henge, the sunset Manhattan Henge. And the absolute absurdity of it has become such a social media event.
Oh, yeah. Look at all the people, and the cars are stopped. Like traffic has come to a standstill. It's almost like you're in Yellowstone and there's a bear sighting.
Exactly. And this is happening on all of the double wide streets. So
that is
14,
insane.
34,
look at all those people out of the cars. That is just crazy.
That's 42. It happens on 57th, but 42 is the best street. I like the guy in the orange shorts there doing a selfie in the middle of the street.
Oh my God.
It is an absurd night. It's just an absolutely crazy, absurd night when that happens. And
oh, wow.
that picture that last picture was shot in there's an area outside of Grand Central Station, Pershing Square. And there's a little bridge on Park Avenue that goes over 42nd, and that was a really popular place to shoot it. Last summer, the cops shut the street down. They wouldn't let photographers up there anymore, and
Oh,
they had about 10 cops up there keeping everybody away. So you can't shoot this picture anymore from that
wow.
spot. That's another thing about New York. Things disappear before your eyes as buildings grow higher and views are blocked all over the place.
That's why we call it the
So
ever-changing city, right? The ever-changing
the
skyline.
ever-changing city. This picture is the same thing. It's Manhattan Henge, but with an 800 millimeter lens shot from about 42nd and 3rd Avenue of the bridge that I was on that other picture. It's the people on that bridge
And I mean,
at Hershorn Square.
most people are going to understand, that the waviness is just from the compression of the lens. It's the heat coming off of the ground.
Heat. It was a hot night. Yeah.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
not that there's anything wrong with the focus. It's just the compression really just the heat just distorts the image due to the compression of the lens.
Absolutely. So yeah, this is fog. I love rainy, foggy days in New York and trying to find ways to silhouette people against the sky with a New York landmark. We're blessed in New York to have so many recognizable, iconic landmarks, like the Empire State Building and the Chrysler Building and the MetLife Building and the Statue of Liberty and One World Trade Center and the silhouette of Lower Manhattan and the Chrysler Building. They're endless. And
It's really a beautiful
Liberty,
image because it just has sort of that monochromatic feel to it, and I look at this initially and I'm thinking, wow, this is a really nice black and white, and then I see the tungsten glow of the street light there, and it's just like such a perfect balance of tonality.
I love those pictures. I love those pictures you can shoot in color that look black and white. I love those, and our subway entrances in some places are very well positioned for you to shoot up through the subway entrance, towards a building.
Right. Now, of course, in Photoshop, you could just make this black and white, and you could just use a little spot color and keep that color there. So we'll talk about how you did that later, right?
Oh yeah, sure. What's Photoshop again? A couple weeks a year, you get this kind of light once in a while coming down 48th Street, and that's just shot out an office window. The office window, and it's like, oh my God, look what's behind me.
Oh my God, look at this moon. Holy cow.
So this is what I consider to be the ultimate in moons. This is taken from a spot that is literally 25 miles away from New York.
Wow.
It's out in New Jersey. This alignment where you get a full moon behind Lower Manhattan comes up about once every 2 years. I waited about 4 years to get this picture because the other times that it happened, three other times it happened in the previous 4 years were cloudy. And the night that this happened, it was just like, wow, And again, the distance is 25 miles, so you can't make it crisp, right? It's shot with a 6 or an 800 millimeter lens, and you can't make it crisp. You just can't.
And is this full frame, or is this cropped at all?
That's cropped a little bit. That's just a little bit. There's a little bit more on each side.
So I don't want everybody to worry. We're going to come back after we go through some of the images, and Gary's going to talk about how he figures out his position and how he knows where to go and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to come back and talk about that.
Yeah, we can go through these probably a little quicker.
Okay, we'll pick up the pace here.
Yeah, it's another eclipse shot from the Brooklyn docks, the cruise ship terminal in Brooklyn. The planes are from the Newark airport. And I will say one thing about the statue. She's almost impossible to photograph in focus, like crisp and tack sharp. It is so weird that the green of her statue just doesn't come up crisp in a JPEG. It's like these cameras struggle with that green. And the other thing that we struggle with is there's so much moisture coming off the bay.
That's what I was going to say. I bet it's probably due to condensation and moisture coming off the water.
Yeah, you're dealing again also in 6 and 800 millimeter lenses, and it's just there's so much moisture in the air. You're down next to the river, and you're shooting through all this haze out in the middle of the harbor. It's really hard to get tack sharp pictures. of her.
That one's pretty sharp.
That one's better. Night is a little better. There's a little less. That's on the Jersey side, so she's a little closer than if you're on the New York side.
Oh yeah.
This is another one of those pictures I waited 4 or 5 years to get. One exact spot at the end of a street in the docks of Newark, and every time the moon came up in that spot, it was a cloudy night, right?
Oh man, yeah.
And then if it doesn't, you got to wait till the next time. The next time could be a year and a half.
That's the thing, I guess.
And
That's always best plans laid to waste, right? Because you can plan and plan and plan and have all the preparation, but then Mother Nature doesn't cooperate with you.
That absolutely a fact. And Mother Nature doesn't always cooperate on moon rises. So this was a lucky one. You can see there were clouds in the air. So
yeah, but
there were clouds, and it's just enough to let us see the moon.
I guess Mother Nature had raked you over the coals enough that she decided she would reward you for your patience.
Right. So this is, I believe this is a pair of pictures here to show one of the things that I talk a lot about in photography, and in this kind of photography, is the repetitive nature of this. Going back to the same spot over and over and over again, hoping that Mother Nature is going to serve up something prettier than the last time you were there. But with this spot, this is just sunrise and sunset. Same spot, same scene, same everything, just the difference in light between sunrise, which is the previous picture, and this one, which is sunset.
And so
you can see the difference.
So what lens did you shoot this with?
That's just probably an equivalent of a 16 to 35 millimeter lens on the M5.
So what are you generally, when you go out, what are you generally carrying on you lens-wise besides your long lenses?
No, normally, unless I'm shooting a moon, that's the only time I take those really long lenses. I am carrying my M5, my little M5, and it's got, like I say, an equivalent of a 16 to 35, and it's got a lens that's about as tall as these glasses are, and it is a 100-400, equivalent of a 1-400. So I've always got a long telephoto lens in my pocket, and I don't carry a bag or a backpack, nothing. These stuff just goes in my pocket.
Show your glasses again. We were on the picture when you. Whoops. Well, hang on.
The lens is about that tall.
Oh, I see.
100 to 400. It's the equivalent of a 100 to 400 millimeter lens.
Wow, that's a tiny
for
lens.
For a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, for that focal length.
Right. I'm a big fan of the M series cameras that Canon makes. They're like the Sony A series. They're exactly the same.
Right, and also Sony has this RX10 IV that's got like a 200. It's a 1-inch sensor. It's got like a 200 to 600 f4 equivalent lens on it. So camera is really insane.
Yeah, this is talking about the difference in light between pre-COVID and post-COVID, or I mean pre-COVID and COVID now. One of the things I talk a lot about these days is this afterglow, this burn that's in the sky after the sun goes below the horizon. Hasn't been happening in the last couple of weeks. And my gut instinct is that there's less haze and pollution in the air, and so there's nothing in the sky to hold the light like there used to be.
Yeah, a lot fewer a lot less car exhaust. Definitely a lot less car exhaust and congestion.
Absolutely. So this picture here, again, this is one of everybody's favorite places to go to shoot sunset. I shot it the other night also again. We're going to lose this picture in the next few months because they're building a building like right in front of the Empire State Building.
Oh, no. Yeah, this picture is really beautiful because it has this yellow, it fades from sort of the red orange. It's almost like the full rainbow, and like the red, orange, yellow into the blue, green, back to blue at the end.
Yeah, that was the way they lit it that night, and they light it almost a different color every night, depending on who pays to promote something.
Oh, now when you say who's doing the lighting?
The Empire State Building.
Oh, on the Empire State Building itself. Okay, yeah, I gotcha.
It's all LED lights, and they honor somebody. Right now, it's red every night because they're honoring healthcare workers. But basically, what happens is companies pay to light it at night to promote something.
I see. I was just looking at like the sun on the buildings, just sort of how that fades from the really red to the gold to the yellow to the green to the blue, It's almost like the full spectrum of the rainbow is reflected in those buildings.
Yeah, the building to the left of the Empire State Building is Manhattan West. It's the new headquarters for the NHL. They're in that building, and that's Manhattan West 1, and they're building Manhattan West 2 just to the right of it. So the new building is going to take out the Empire State Building there.
That's a shame.
It is. It really is. But the ever-changing skyline. So the moonrise, like the sun going up through 42nd Street.
I was going to say, so this is sort of the same, what did you call it? Manhattan Hinge?
Manhattan Hinge. This is like Moonhenge.
So this is Moonhenge. It's the same. It's basically the same location, but now it's at night with the moon instead of the sun.
Correct. Yeah. And I've only taken this picture twice in all my years. Twice. That's how often it lines up.
And that's since 2011. So that would be like twice in 9 years.
Yeah. Twice in 9 years I've shot this picture. So, yeah. That is the new outdoor observation deck at Hudson Yards called The Edge. The interesting story with this picture is a year ago, this was the day before it opened in March this year. And in March 2019, they opened up the vessel at Hudson Yards, the staircase sculpture that everybody climbs.
Yep.
And we were, I was out trying to find angles on Hudson Yards in general. And I happened to notice that the sun in early March, went down behind this part of the building. And I waited a year. A year later, I went back to the same spot. And guess what? The sun was there going down the day before that the outdoor observation deck opened. So this thing, you got to put it in your brain, okay, I got to mark this down. A year from now, I got to come back to this spot to get the sun. And things like that. The sun's only going to be there behind that wedge for like 4 days. And then it's gone.
So do you, do you keep like a notebook or a journal of like ideas and things that are coming up? Do you have that somewhere?
I do. I put it in my phone. I'll start looking at alignments for the sun and the moon into May, June, July, and I'll put them in my phone so that they're reminders to think about places to take the pictures. And that's literally the next day from the top of that, from out there on that deck.
Oh, so that's the view from up there.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I'm actually inside the office building looking through a window, and she's out on the observation deck.
No, she was just somebody like a tourist that was there, right? It's not somebody that you put out there.
It was actually a media day. It was a media preview day, but there were guests and there were invitees and stuff like that. So yeah, it opened about 2 hours later to the public.
Wow, this is beautiful.
Helicopters going around Lower Manhattan with the tribute and lights. Yeah.
Now, what kind of exposure are you shooting here?
That's probably 15 seconds, I bet. Maybe even up to 30 almost.
Now, are you doing a lot of a lot of time exposures, like a lot of like 10, 15, 30 second exposures?
I'm not a big fan of that look. A lot of photographers in town are using neutral density filters so that they can, they'll use up to 10 stops of neutral density filters to put a 5 minute exposure on their cameras. I'm not a big fan of how everything like the water in the Hudson River flattens out. I don't like to flatten it out too much, make it look too unrealistic.
Right.
But it's art. Some people like it because it's very arty. As much as we wish these lights didn't have to be lit every year, it's the most beautiful thing to photograph that you can imagine. And on the night of September 11th, when the sun goes down, the lights very slowly fade in, right? They turn the lights on in the daylight, maybe half an hour before the sun sets, and you can't see them. And then as this starts to get a little darker, then you start to see a faint blue light. It's incredible to stand out there and watch these lights come in. And you can photograph them from Brooklyn and Jersey. You can go south. You can't really go north to photograph these lights because the two lights blend into one if you go too far north. You have to see both beams to appreciate it.
It really is a stunning and moving tribute to
the moving memorial.
It is. It really is.
Yeah, and it's art. I mean, the Art Institute of New York were the people that developed it. It's now run by the Memorial, but the Art Institute was the one that came up with the idea way back in 2002.
No,
This is a sunrise.
Yeah, this is a really interesting picture. It's just the abstract nature of it. It's so different
Yeah,
from like everything else that you've done. Everything else is just so crisp and compressed and bold, and
yeah,
this
this
one is
is
just
the
so abstract.
it's a shadow, right? It's the sun is casting a shadow on the mist or the haze, and it's photographing as a shadow. It's great, yeah.
And yeah, like I mean, it looks like it's inverted. You know, it looks like
Yeah,
it's like a reflected, like a mirror, like it's mirrored across the middle. I've never seen
yeah, and
anything like that.
there are days when the sun hits the antenna on top of the World Trade Center and sends a black shadow straight up in the air. It's really a bizarre effect when that happens. And again, it all depends on the atmospheric conditions and what kind of haze or clouds are in the air to create that effect. Sunrise, you get these sunrises once every few months.
I like these
And
images where you find you have these like nice colors, but you find some kind of a foreground element that kind of catches your eye, like with the bird.
that's the top of a garbage can out on the pier.
Oh, that's the reflection.
Yeah.
Yeah, the reflection in the
Yeah,
bottom. Yep.
yeah, it's a plastic top to a garbage can. Yep.
Wow, nice find.
Yeah, put something in the foreground, put something at the bottom. Uh, so one of my favorite times of the year, it happens in like November and February, is when the sun sets behind the Statue of Liberty. You're standing on the Manhattan Bridge. You're shooting through the Brooklyn Bridge, and the statue's in the background there. And again, this you get to shoot this picture for about a week, or maybe 5 days in November and maybe 5 days in February. And it
Hey,
always produces a beautiful photo.
does it ever work that you get the statue is like completely with the sun completely behind it, so that the statue is kind of silhouetted against the circle
Oh
of the
yeah,
sun?
yeah. You can, yeah, absolutely, yep. Just like the moon, you can do it. This is Manhattan Henge again, a sunrise Manhattan Henge. This time from on 42nd Street.
So I'm going to say this is probably stopped down to probably f/16 or so, and that's how you're getting that
Easily. Yeah,
flare with sort of the
yeah,
fingers of the
absolutely.
sun. Yeah. So if
Oh
you
yeah,
if you stop your lens down to f/16, f/20, f/22, any kind of specular highlight is going to flare out like that.
correct. You can overdo it. Sometimes it looks good and sometimes it looks terrible, but
Yeah.
you have to be careful.
It certainly works
Yeah.
here.
And birds, everybody knows I shoot seagulls. A lot of seagulls. They're when I can't find a person to put in a picture, I can always find a bird. And
No. What is this
some of
shot
the
with?
birds,
What kind of lens is this?
oh, that's probably my G7X, my little pocket camera, and it's just wide angle lens with it maybe 2 inches from its face. Some birds just don't fly away; they just don't go away, and they'll look at you. So
Yeah, I really enjoy these images that have that really strong foreground element, and then you get that kind of sweeping
yeah,
skyline in the background. I love those types of images.
there's literally thousands of birds out on the river, and you can see the old pier, the wooden pegs from the old pier. Every one of those pegs has a bird on it by about 15 minutes before sunset. They all leave in the morning and they all come back. And there are areas all up and down the Hudson River like that, and there's just hundreds and thousands of birds. So they're not hard to find, and they're always flying in the air and fun to photograph.
Rats with wings, as they say, right?
Yeah, yeah, rats with wings.
Okay, so just a couple of things. We're going to transition over to some of the images that Gary has made in just like the last couple of months here. So yeah, we're going to transition over to some of the images Gary has made in the last couple of months here that are really more kind of reflect the changes that have happened in the city since the COVID-19 crisis has come on. Now, I'm seeing in the comments. So guys, I am monitoring the comments on the chat. So I am seeing the questions come in, and I'm flagging a few questions and setting those aside. But we are going to take questions at the end. So you can go ahead and post your questions in the chat, and I'll try to catch them. But you may also want to post them again at the end when we do go into the Q&A. All right.
Yeah.
All right. So let's jump into
COVID-19.
COVID.
So, New York is it's an extraordinary place right now. From the middle of March when they shut the city down, told people to stay home and not come in. This is your daily look at Grand Central. This has usually got hundreds of people on the floor.
Yeah, that place is
And
always packed. I've tried to shoot like an engagement session there before, and you can there's never anything clean in there.
No, one of the funny tricks in New York, if you talk to Instagrammers, I try to take pictures with people in them, right? I like the human element in every picture,
Absolutely.
in almost every picture. And the Instagrammers hate people. They want pictures with nobody in them, and they'll go into here and they'll shoot a 5-minute exposure or 30-minute exposure with their neutral density filter to try and blur it so much that there's nobody in there. It's just a blank floor, right?
Right.
And
I've seen wedding photographers try to do that also.
Yeah, you can't do it in here because there's somebody always walking in right at the last minute. You can't ever get this floor empty, and it is spooky to be in there and just stand there and nobody walks through. Unless a commuter train comes in. This was like March 12th or 13th before the city was shut. I was still going to work in the city, and people were starting to appear with masks, and you could sense something was coming. Right? It was just an eerie place even before they shut it down. People were on edge. Fifth Avenue, birds hang out all over the street rather than cars and people. There's nobody there.
Yeah, the traffic
on Fifth Avenue.
So little traffic.
And New York taxi cabs are a great identifier. Everybody knows that yellow cab is a great identifier for New York City.
Yep.
So, put them in your picture. Sunrise along the Hudson River. Usually there's a lot of people out running, jogging. I found one person walking. I like going out for the sunrises because there's nobody out there. You don't have to worry too much about social distancing because you're out there. You're totally out there by yourself. Except for the odd person.
So do you go out? I mean, so for example, Gary is a photo editor at Fox News, and he typically works like a 6:30 to 2:30 kind of shift, and so it's really ideal for going out for doing sunset stuff because he gets off early enough in the afternoon. But do you go out for a lot of sunrises as well?
Well, if I was going, if I was going to the office, I'm on a 6:10 subway from Hoboken to New York, and starting this week was my prime time for going out every morning before work to shoot sunrise because starting yesterday or today, the sunrise is at 6 o'clock in the morning, 6 a.m. For sun up. And that half an hour before the sun actually comes up, when you get this kind of color in the sky, you can see the sun is almost up. It's not quite up on the horizon yet behind the Empire State Building there. So I'd be out there this week at 5:30, and every, for the next 2 months, I'd be out 5:30ish by the river to photograph sunrise, and I'm missing it. Yeah, not going to be the same. So this was sunrise a couple weeks ago from back from the river in Jersey City. One of the things that I wanted to talk about was how do you know which sunrises to go out? When do you actually go out for a sunrise? A lot of people, if you don't live in Hoboken, you have to commit to it the night before, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to set my alarm for 5 o'clock, and I'm going to drive for 10 miles or whatever, 30 minutes to get to the river and photograph sunrise, and then it's cloudy. But you got to go, right? Because you never know. I use an app. I use the Earth Cams. I don't know if anybody's familiar with them, but Earth Cams have live webcams all over the world. There's about 10 Earth Cams in New York. So on this morning, I set my alarm for sunrise, and while I'm still at home in bed, I'm looking at the Earth Cam to look at the sky and the cloud formations to figure out whether or not it's worth going out for sunrise. And it's another way using the technology that's out there to maximize or minimize, I should say, the amount of time that you actually have to go out and spend out photographing. So, it's really great in the winter when you don't want to be out in minus temperatures.
So I know when we were talking yesterday, you were saying that None of this is really luck. Everything is really like planned down almost to the
Correct.
nth degree. So like what's your success fail rate? So like how often do you feel like you go out and you don't really come back with something that you were expecting?
Well, okay. That's about 10% of the time. If I make a decision to go out, I'll come back with a picture every time. There'll be something. It may not be as vivid in the colors as I was hoping it to be. Maybe the clouds didn't part enough. I saw the cloud formations, and I was hoping that they'd part a little more or a little less to create a certain, effect. This particular morning, I looked at it. I could see the clouds and the stripes in the clouds. Even in the dark, you can see that where the blue sky is. And anytime that you have stripes of clouds and blue sky, that's the day to go out because that's when you get this kind of an effect, the shadowy effect. And so I could see that on the app, and it was like, get out of bed, get in the car, and go. And it's literally a 7-minute drive to the spot that I wanted to shoot this from. So that's one of the advantages of living in Hoboken. So
Sure.
yeah. This was the last full moon, just the beginning of April. That was the super moon. I started out on a spot in Jersey City, higher up, a nice elevation to give me a nice picture of back from the river, to give me the moon and the Empire State Building together about 30 minutes earlier than this picture was taken. You always want to, if you're going out to shoot a moon, you always want to take into consideration how long it takes for the moon to get to the top of a building, and find an angle and find a spot that'll allow you to photograph the moon just as the sun's going down, because then you can take a picture that has detail in the moon. We all want to see the moon. We want to see it orange. We want to see the craters on the moon. If you wait too long, as the sky's getting too dark, the moon looks like this. It looks white. It's a white dot in the sky. So I started out in a spot where I got the moon. I think it's like the next picture, maybe. I started out in a spot where the moon was right at the top of the Empire State Building, but I was 2 miles back. And that meant I saw the moon 30 minutes earlier at the top than I would if I was standing next to the river. This is right at the river. If you're standing by the river, it takes almost 1 hour for the moon to get to the top of the Empire State Building. It takes an hour and a half for the moon to get to the top of the World Trade Center. So I got to shoot this moon from 2 different spots on the same night and make 2 different pictures.
How long did it take you to cover those 2 miles? And I guess the one thing is you didn't have, like, it's probably a lot faster now because there's so much less traffic.
No traffic. It was less than 10 minutes to get from one spot to the next. So you were talking about longer exposures. This is a night where I tried a little longer exposure. The clouds were moving super fast over the city, so I tried to show a little bit of motion.
How much? What do you think this is?
This is about 15 seconds.
15 seconds.
Yeah, about 15 seconds. And one of the other things about the sun and the sun flare, not only do you get that flare when you shoot at, say, f11 or f16, but when you put the sun on the edge of a building, it'll also create the flare. Just as it starts to move to an empty space between those buildings, it'll naturally create the sun flare. The closer you can keep it to the side of a building.
So were you shooting it with a lot of depth of field here, or is this just completely natural from the...
This is shot like almost everything. I'll give you away my secret. This is shot like almost everything I shoot. P for professional.
Exactly. I know all about that.
P for professional. And I live on P. And I use the exposure compensation to change the exposure a little bit, up a stop, down 2 stops to control the highlights. Yeah, and I try to expose for the highlights as best as I can. And one of the reasons I use the 2 cameras that I use, and I also have a third camera, the Canon, the mirrorless RP camera. All 3 of these cameras are designed in the same way so that there's a dial on the top of the camera that controls the exposure compensation. It's not a menu item. It's an actual physical dial.
Right.
So if I leave the camera on P, I can just turn this one dial with my thumb, and I can see instantly on the monitor how the exposure will change.
That's really interesting because I used to shoot pre-Sony. I used to shoot a lot of aperture value. So I would typically set my camera for 2.8 or 1.4 or whatever the widest aperture was, and I would shoot a lot of AV aperture value mode so that I picked the f-stop and the camera picked the shutter speed to match with it. But I was doing the same thing. I was using exposure compensation to control the camera. And really that's just another way, even though you're shooting in an automatic mode, that's just another way of doing manual exposure, because you're not just accepting the exposure that the camera's giving you, because the camera might get fooled by, you know, when you're shooting into the sun, it's going to get fooled by the brightness of the sun, or if you're shooting in an area with a lot of shadow and a little bit of highlight, you know, you may end up overexposing. So you really just have to understand how exposure compensation works. And point being, again, it's an automatic mode, but by using the exposure compensation dial, you are still manually controlling your exposure. Now, when I switched over to Sony, I shoot mostly manual now, because I just find, because the placement of the shutter dial is right above my thumb, and it's just easier for me to move the shutter dial myself than it is to change the exposure compensation. So I just typically shoot more manual now, but it's not because I wasn't happy shooting aperture value. I just find with Sony that the manual mode for me works a little better.
Right. And one of the things about shooting in P that I like is your exposure. Even if you screw up an exposure, you never screw it up enough that it wrecks the picture.
Right. Exactly.
It's always going to expose well.
You're going to be reasonably close. Exactly. Yeah.
And, you know, it may be a half stop over or a little bit under, but it's very close on P.
Right.
And I'm not spending much time thinking about what shutter speed or f-stop I should think about. I spend all my time thinking about composition, right? Everything is about composition. And
like this?
And trying to, like one of the, I love the monitor on the back because it allows me to shoot almost full frame. Almost every one of these pictures is almost no cropping at all. This is exactly full frame. And the monitor lets me do that. So this was the night of that rainbow that I know some people have seen. After the rainbow, there was this extraordinary sunset. And luckily, there were some people next to the river with their masks and face shields. And you just combine them into a news photo, basically, right?
Exactly.
You know, New York in, I'm still a journalist at heart. I'm still trying to post quickly. I used to want to be the first person on the wire. I want to be the first person on Twitter with a picture from a sunset, and I want to bring in the news elements. I'm still thinking about the news elements, and most people know that I'm distributing all these pictures through Getty Images, so they're news pictures. You know, you can look at this picture and go, "Wow, isn't that a really pretty picture?" And look at the colors, and it's pretty. But this is a solid news photo because the boat traffic has gone on the Hudson River. And we are now seeing, like glass-like rivers or water at night in the river that we used to never see. And that's part of this story about COVID, is what's happening on the river is much different than what it used to be. So now, if there's too much wind and it's a windy, stormy night, you're not going to get still water. But as long as there's no wind, this is what you get out there now. And you have to photograph it and tell the story about New York. This tells a story about New York in COVID times.
Do you have that? Is that rainbow picture in here? I was trying to go back. Yeah. Okay, so it's in here.
It should be in there. Yeah.
Okay.
This is sunrise last week. Nothing special. Just at the top of the. Just again positioning, knowing where to stand to get it at the top. This was a couple nights ago. Different spot on the river again in Weehawken to get the Empire State Building in the middle. I've been doing this a lot just because I know it's going to disappear. So I want to photograph it for, historical purposes because it'll disappear and never come back.
Yep.
42nd Street, one of the busiest cross streets of New York. And that's what it looks like today, or that's what it can look like. There's nobody out there. Fifth Avenue. looking towards Washington Square at the end there where the arch is. Again, everybody's doing these pictures. There's nothing new about this. Everybody's out there trying to do it. But it's just everybody wants to do this. And everybody keeps asking me, I've only been in the city 3 times in a month. And each time it's very quick. I drive in, I park my car. You can park anywhere you want right now. You get out, you take 5 steps away from your car, you shoot a picture, you get back in your car. And but everybody wants to see what the city looks like and how eerie it feels with nobody there.
When you're walking down the street, do you ever get like dirty looks, or have you gotten any pushback on your Instagram feed from people saying, "Hey, why are you doing this? You should be staying at home"?
I did at the start. People were asking me why I was out, why I was doing this, and I had to remind a few people that I am a journalist, and I do give them to Getty, and journalists are an essential job in today's world.
That's correct.
And we do have an exemption, so I'm not just going in for the fun of it. So I'm trying to, tell the story from my eyes of what's going on in New York right now. Park Avenue. Now you get people with masks crossing the street, just that little detail that differentiates between any normal day. You can go out and probably shoot this picture almost any day, right? Depending on how the stoplights line up, there may be no cars, but you're not going to get, people with masks going across Park Avenue.
Exactly.
Again, 42nd Street, empty. It's usually full of cars, bumper to bumper.
Times Square, empty. Wow.
Again, empty.
Wow, there's not even any mimes or panhandlers out there.
Nothing, nobody, zero. The odd person walks by.
So
no tourists because the hotels are closed. Nobody's coming to New York.
So what has happened with like a lot of the homeless people?
They're out there. They're living in the subway. To be honest with you, they're riding the subway trains, and
are they less visible?
Lucas Jackson at Reuters had a nice story the other day about the homeless people in the subway.
Are they much less visible now?
No, they're more visible because they're the only people out there, and they're the only people wandering around. They're sleeping on the streets, and they are more visible. They're not blending into anything anymore. Yeah, you see them.
Oh yeah, look at that.
One guy, he was jogging right down the middle of 7th Avenue, stopped to take a picture and kept on going. Rollerblading down the center of 5th Avenue. Bizarre. There was the moon picture from that we were talking about.
Oh yeah.
That's the one from. So you can see the difference in the moon. This one has detail in it because it was photographed 30 minutes before the previous one.
Right. So the ambient light is a little bit brighter.
Correct. And there's another one. And yeah.
You want to say something about it? Did I cut you
off
too early?
I was going to say, no, same thing, just at the top. There it is at the top, and once it got to that spot, it was get in the car and run to the other spot. So. And again, it's all lined up. I knew the 2 spots based on the apps where to go to get the 2 pictures that I wanted. Like this. That's Broadway through Soho. Usually super busy. Nobody out there. Another transit terminal, the Oculus. Everybody's been going to do this. A couple weeks ago, they added the flags to it. So they weren't there when they first shut the city down, but now the flags are up.
The Oculus is at One World Trade, right? It's in the Trade Center Plaza.
Yeah, that's where the trains from Jersey come in, and all the New York subway trains go through. So social distancing, you'll never see people that far apart in that building, and it's usually packed. But it was a nice way to show people doing what they're supposed to do. That was right after a train came in from Jersey, so they were walking. People are walking through to the other end where the New York subway is.
I mean, one thing that I've talked with other people about, like it's really important, I think, to document what's going on during this time. And it's kind of like I've been asking myself, like, who's going to step up and who's going to be sort of the visual historian of record from this time in our lives? Who's going to end up being that Dorothea Lange or the Robert Capa or the person who is just known for, for documenting what happened during this time. And I hope that it's not going to end up being some kind of a screen grab from Zoom, since that has really sort of become the icon of what's been going on here. But really, there needs to be a visual record of things like this, because we need to preserve what's happened here for the record, for history, for people coming behind us. Because
I agree.
Because you're not going to see pictures like this again. Hopefully, we're not going to see pictures like this again in our lifetimes.
I would hope we don't. I hope we don't have to see this kind of emptiness ever again once this starts to ease up and gets back to normal. But the agencies in New York are doing a great job doing it, and there's been a lot of great pictures across AP, Reuters, AFP, Getty, EPA. People like Mark Peterson, Peter Turnley's turning out some excellent work. So
right, I'm trying to get Peter to come on the show and talk about his project. And I did reach out to him, and he told me he wanted to kind of stay focused on what he was doing right now. And I certainly can understand that. He didn't feel like he was ready to really talk about it, but he did express some interest in doing it maybe down the road once he sort of has his collection of work. So hopefully we'll be able to get that. And I think I'm going to try to reach out to some of the people that you mentioned, like Mark Peterson, and there was a couple other photographers that you mentioned, and at least I'd love to have somebody on from New York to kind of talk about it from that New York perspective, because New York has been so hard hit. I mean, New York has a higher infection rate and more fatalities than a lot of countries around the world. So yeah, it's really
the epicenter.
It is really.
It really is the epicenter, and the
in the world,
in New York,
in the world, not just in the United States, but worldwide. New York is the epicenter of the COVID crisis, which is interesting because it was so late to kind of come into play, because all you heard about was China and then Italy and Spain, and it just kind of slowly came around the world to New York, and now New York has really just become the center.
And we knew it. Look, I think those of us who live here knew it was eventual. It was going to hit here and hit here hard. And as Governor Cuomo mentions almost every day, and he did again today at his briefing, New York is the epicenter, because New York. He was having this angry rant about Mitch McConnell and some bills being passed and asking the states to bankrupt themselves, and he said, look, New York is the epicenter and deserves the most, because this is where everybody comes to. If a tourist comes to Kentucky, they don't fly from Europe or China to Louisville. They come to New York and they get on another plane. And when they change planes, they spread the virus. So New York he elevates New York, above everybody else when it comes to getting money, to help New York get back on its feet.
Yeah, he's done a great job for you guys. Yeah, he really has.
Yeah, he has. Brooklyn Bridge.
Oh, hang on a minute. Some reason these slideshows want to start on here. Do I just change to this? Yeah, Brooklyn Bridge empty is not one you see very often.
Every day.
Backwards or forwards here? Oh, there.
There you go. Daytime, like a daytime picture of the Brooklyn Bridge empty. It's not something you'll photograph every day of the week.
Yeah.
Or any day of the week.
Yeah, for real. Again, I've had wedding couples up on that bridge, and trying to make a clean picture on there is just really it's impossible. That place is so packed typically.
It's one of the number one tourist sites, one of the the top 5 tourist sites in the country, and you can't make a clean picture of anything on this bridge because there's so many people. It's empty, That's Canal Street, heading into the Holland Tunnel. It's one of the most congested streets in the city.
Yeah, and I like the ones where you can see the masks. I think it's really important to kind of show the masks in these types of images.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if you look at the empty streets, you might think, well, that's a weekend, or it's a Sunday morning, or it's 5 a.m. or whatever. But I think when you really kind of tie it together with all those other elements, it really drives it home.
Park Avenue, going into this is south of this is Park Avenue to the north of Grand Central. The other one was Park Avenue to the south of Grand Central. And 2 sides of Grand Central, and that's what you see. Nothing.
Yeah, that is really crazy.
It's crazy.
There's the rainbow picture.
So yeah, this was a big one on social media the other day. everybody asks about this picture. I get a lot of questions about this picture, obviously. And again, using the apps, using a radar app, looking at the storms moving through the area in real time and what time the back end of the storm is moving through Manhattan, going to move through Manhattan and New York, you can pretty much predict a rainbow. You really, can pretty much predict a rainbow. It's not that hard. And I was about 100% sure there'd be a rainbow that night. So I just went out to a spot, as luck would have it, the rainbow arced from the Empire State Building to the World Trade Center.
Okay, so how do you predict a rainbow?
Okay, rainbow. Well, by watching the real time.
Give us some rainbow 101 here, some rainbow photo 101.
Okay, one, you look at the weather forecast. It says rain until 5 o'clock, and then the weather forecast says after 5 it's going to be sunny out. Okay, so that's your first potential, especially when the things start to mesh up within an hour and a half of sunset. And so that's the first giveaway for me. The forecast that says the rain's moving out and the sun's coming up at around an hour before sunset or 2 hours before sunset. Then I go to the radar app. I use an app called Radar Scope, and then I can watch the cloud formations on up to the second real time radar, and I can see the clouds coming in, and behind the cloud it's black, which means clear sky. And you can just follow it. You see it coming, and you can go, it's the back end of the storm. If there's water in it, not all storms have rain all the way to the very back end of the storm, or the storm cell, I should say. But this night it did. It was raining over Manhattan, and it had just stopped raining where I was standing in Jersey City. And that's why you get a rainbow, because there's still moisture falling from the sky as the sun's coming out behind you.
Now I know you said that there's not a lot of luck involved in these, because you really do utilize technology and you kind of plan this stuff kind of down to the nth degree. But come on now, you can't tell me that when you get a rainbow that goes from the top of the Empire State Building to the top of One World Trade, that there's not some luck involved in that.
That's 100% luck. It's 100% luck. The positioning of the rainbow is it's a bit of a guess. It's a bit of a guess. The closer it is to sunset, the more likely the rainbow, in this case where I was standing, would be shifted to the right, because the sun would be moving behind me to the left. So the rainbow is going to shift a little to the right. This rainbow was about an hour and a half before sunset. So it was maybe an hour before sunset. And so where I was, the positioning was, it was pure luck. It's 100% luck. Well, for positioning, you can choose where you go. I mean, I went to this spot hoping to get the World Trade Center under the rainbow.
Right.
That was my guess. That if the rainbow appeared, I'd be in a spot where the rainbow would arc over the World Trade Center, and it would be inside the rainbow. But as you can see, I was off by a few feet.
I think when as a young lad, when I was coming along, one of the first things I learned was it's better to be lucky than good. So I'll take being lucky anytime. But there's also an old Vince Lombardi quote that goes something along the lines of luck is where preparation meets opportunity. So you're not going to fall into pictures like this unless you're well prepared beforehand and you've done your homework. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, if this is full frame, this is edge to edge, right? So if that rainbow had been a little to the left, I lose the World Trade Center in keeping the whole arc of the rainbow. If it had been a little bit to the right, I lose the Empire State Building. So there's also that amount of luck that was involved with this. Not just that it arced from one building to the other, but that it fit within the lens I had, which was like 16 millimeters. Again, the Hudson River. I'm just trying to show off that smooth water in the river as much as I can.
So let's let's talk a little bit about like how have things changed? Like I know for one, well, obviously there's less cars, there's less people in the city, so there's less pollution in the sky. So how has that situation changed the kinds of images that you make? I know you said that there's not as much pollution in the sky, so you kind of lose some of that haze. It doesn't hold the color as long. So can you talk a little bit about how the situation has changed, how the types of images that you're able to make?
Yeah, so well, certainly the thing that I'm noticing most about the light is different. I will absolutely stand my ground and say that the light is different than it was before COVID. And why is that light different? Because there's less pollution and there's less haze, there's less pollution in the sky. That changes the color, the tones, the quality of the light, the saturation, the intensity, the contrast of the light. So one of the things that I am noticing now is that in the past, before COVID, if you went out to photograph sunset, you would find that the optimum light was about 20 minutes before sunset, the time the sun sets. So if sunsets at 7:30, about 7:10, you need to be out there to get this 20 minutes of golden, gorgeous light. This golden hour. What I'm finding now is that color and that intensity is now about an hour before sunset. I'm
Wow.
going out a full hour before the sunset time because between say 6:30 and 7, there's an intensity to the light. It doesn't always have the same golden color to it, but it has this contrast and intensity to it that I can't say I've ever really seen before. So it's a whole different dimension to photograph in for this extra half hour. And then you get your golden light, and it's really pretty. And then when the sun goes down below the horizon, you always get what I call this afterglow or a burn, where if you look at the skyline of New York from Jersey, the golden sky is reflected in the buildings, and that's when you get this beautiful gold tone through all the glass, and it's a stunning color and intensity. That's gone. I have not found a night when I'm shooting sunset where there's a burn or an afterglow because there's no haze in the sky to give you the color that's reflecting off the buildings. It doesn't exist. You need either clouds or haze or pollution or something in the sky, in the western sky, that soaks up the light as it's coming up from the horizon as the sun has gone down. And it's a very once the sun goes below the horizon, it's a very powerful orange that radiates up. But it's not radiating into anything anymore. So sunset is gone in like a minute, just gone. And what I will tell you though is you get a picture like this where blue hour is starting quicker, where you get this blue sky in the background. Even though the sun's gone down, the eastern sky goes very blue. And that is starting earlier. So you used to get 20 minutes of sunset, then you'd get about 20 minutes of a burn, and then you'd get about 20 minutes of blue. Now you're getting about an hour of sunset and instant blue hour
Wow.
within minutes of the sun going underneath the horizon. So for me, as an urban landscape photographer, whatever we want to call it, I'm being able to shoot pictures that have different tones through it, different look than what it would look like if the world was normal and all the businesses were, the cars were on the road and factories were belching out all the smoke that they used to belch out. So it's a different quality light.
Let's and what about so there's less cars in the city. I mean, what about just sort of like people's psyches in general? I mean, how do you think people are dealing with the whole situation there as far as like having to be confined at home? Because the population density is so much higher. Living space is so much smaller. I mean, it's one thing for me to be confined here at my house, but I mean, I don't live in a mansion, but I have a bit of space I can spread out in.
Right.
But living space in New York, as we know, is a premium. So how do you think that people are dealing with that?
Difficult. A lot of people have left town. They've got second homes, or maybe they went to visit family somewhere else. They've gotten out because they didn't want to stay at home in a one bedroom apartment, pulling their hair out. There's a lot of stories about roommates that hate each other more than they ever did because they can't get away from each other now. I've read a great story about that.
I've been trying to decide if maybe after this is over with. So like, obviously a lot of people in the portrait industry and the wedding industry are thinking, 9 months from now there's going to be a boom in maternity and newborn photography. But
that and divorces.
Well, I was going to say maybe the lawyers are salivating also because as soon as people can go to court, it's going to go both ways, and there's going to be a lot more divorces as well.
Both ways. I will say though, where I'm on the Jersey side, I'm in Hoboken, and I think one of the most contentious issues that I think we face here is outdoor time and how much time people are spending outside running, exercising, walking, getting some air. And Hoboken is relatively small. It's 1 mile square, and there's a really nice waterfront walkway along the waterfront with piers and parks. And a few weeks ago, they shut the parks down. They shut all the parks down, so you can't even go into the parks that are along the river. You can walk along the river, but you can't go out into the piers. And it's been a bit of a I think it's a bit of a contentious issue because I want the parks open because I think it spreads people out. And my feeling is by closing off these parks, you're not keeping people at home. People are still going out, but they're going out and congregating in a smaller area. And I read a story last week in the Washington Post. They ran a great editorial, pleaded with the mayor in D.C. to open the parks because it was affecting too many people's mental health. That they need time out from their house, and yet the parks stay closed. And I have no idea when these parks are going to open up in Hoboken. And one of the problems in Hoboken is it's the parks that offer the best views of the city. So I can't photograph from them, so I have to go to Jersey City or Weehawken more than I sometimes normally do to get these pictures.
Well, what's been kind of interesting where I live here in Virginia is a lot of the local parks are closed as well. In fact, there's a little park near my house, a county park, and they've actually barricaded off the parking lot so that you can't park there. But yet the trails in the park are open, so you're welcome to walk the trails. You just have to get there, and they've barricaded off the parking lot, so people come and they just park on the side of the road on the shoulder. So I'm kind of like, what's the point of having the parking lot closed, because people are just going to come and park anyway. So why not just open the parking lot up and take that traffic off of the shoulder of the road and make it a little bit safer, at least in that regard, because you're not keeping anybody out of the park in the first place. So,
and they're not keeping people off the streets here. They're just jamming them into a smaller area on the street. So I don't know. It's. I know we're supposed to stay home and everybody's not supposed to go out at all, but people are still gonna, go out and get some air.
Well, let's all right. So let's transition over to some of the technical side of it.
Sure.
So I think it's time to go ahead and let's drop the bomb on everybody about all your detailed post-production and preparation and how many hours you spend at the computer getting the moon in place and arranging all the elements in Photoshop. So. Okay, Gary, let me get you up full screen here. All right, Gary, go ahead and drop the bomb on everybody and tell everybody how much time you spend in post-production.
About 30 seconds.
I know
maybe
people are
a minute.
Yeah.
Maybe a minute. I don't know. 30 seconds. I don't do any post-production. I don't shoot RAW. I've never shot a RAW picture in my life. I don't have any RAW files that I could pull out of my hard drives. When we did the book, Warren Winter, who published the book, said, you'll have to send me all the RAW files and we'll have to Photoshop. I said, I don't have any RAW files. I don't think he'd ever published a book without RAW files. So I have no RAW files. I don't shoot RAW. I don't want to tinker. The journalist in me, even with a sunrise or a sunset, says get it to Twitter or Instagram before anybody else does. And it's easy now because there's nobody else out there, or almost nobody else out there. But, pre-COVID, I'd go out, for a sunrise and there'd be 20 other photographers in the same place. Shoot a moonrise, there'll be 100 other photographers in the same place now. So I shoot everything in JPEG. I edit on the back of the camera. I pick the picture that I like. I send it over to my phone, put it in Instagram. I'll crop it in Instagram. Maybe in Instagram, I might, do a bit of contrast with it, depending, how the digital camera recorded the light, and that's it. And then post it. So, I keep getting comments all the time. Follow Gary because he puts his stuff up as it's happening, and that is something that I really like to do.
Okay, so you're going to tell me that this image right here, this is a JPEG, no Photoshop.
That's JPEG. That was 2012. That was shoot it on as a JPEG, walk over to my car, put it in the laptop, and send it to Reuters. That was a news photo. I was working for Reuters with that one. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think that's just going to shock people. So just to recap, Gary's shooting this like a journalist. He's like he's out shooting features for Reuters or the New York Times or the Washington Post or some news organization. He goes out there and he shoots these landscape pictures. He shoots some JPEG and he transfers them from his camera to his phone using the Wi-Fi, the built-in Wi-Fi. And then he uses an app on the photo. What are you using? Just in Instagram?
Instagram.
Yes, he's just using the tools on Instagram to crop.
No Snapseed or any of those other Lightroom or Photoshop. They all have mobile versions.
And then he's going to Instagram from out on the street. So that's the post-production process on these images. And I mean, that's insane. I mean, first of all, just talking about using those little M5 cameras, and you call them consumer cameras or amateur cameras, but obviously, camera is really is only as good as whoever has it in their hands. And so it just goes to show that somebody that really knows what they're doing can make good pictures with pretty much any camera. But also just, it's not something that you have to spend hours and hours. Like I know a lot of people are concerned that they don't like doing the post-production because it takes so much time. But if you really refine your approach and know what you're doing, then it doesn't have to.
It doesn't. The one thing that we were taught from day one, whether it was film, whether it was transparency film, negative film, black and white, black and white was different, but and then we went to digital. If you expose it properly and you have a proper color balance, especially on digital, you don't have to do any post-production. So the thing for me is I find filing pictures the most boring part of photography. I just hate coming back home and knowing that I have 10 or 12 pictures that I need to send to Getty, and I have to crop them and caption them and keyword them and all that. And what saves me is trying to get it right in the camera right off the bat. If you get it right in the camera, there's no Photoshop involved. You don't have to do anything to the file. The cameras are so good. The software inside these cameras today, whether it's Sony, Nikon, Canon, is so good at creating a JPEG and producing the color that the camera saw when it recorded the data, that you don't have to use Photoshop to enhance it or make it better. You just have to expose it properly, and usually that means exposing it a little underexposed to saturate the colors. That's what gives you all that beautiful colors. Expose for the highlight and let everything else go where it goes.
So a couple of questions. With your JPEGs, are you shooting sRGB or are you shooting Adobe 1998 color profile?
It's what's in the camera. I don't think I've ever looked. I think all the Canon stuff is sRGB.
Most cameras are most sRGB.
On the consumer cameras.
Most cameras are sRGB out of the box, and so a lot of people that do shoot JPEG might switch them over to Adobe 1998 if they're just shooting if they're only shooting JPEGs, just because it gives them a little bit more color range. But if your end goal is social media and the web, and then sRGB is probably the right space to be in.
Right. I remember on my professional gear, the 1DXs, I had it set for Adobe 1998.
Are you doing any kind of in-camera profiling? Are you gone into your JPEG settings? Are you bumping the contrast or the saturation or the sharpness up, or is it just you just shooting everything flat?
Whatever it is out of the box.
Right.
Yeah, I don't change anything.
So you guys start getting your questions ready. We're going to start doing the Q&A here in just a few minutes. So Gary, you want to kind of jump into social media and talk about well, let's do this. So let's talk about like what's a
Sure.
like when you go out, what's your typical day like? So and we need to talk about the apps too. So why don't you talk a little bit about how you plan, where you're going to go, what you're going to do, and what tools you're using to do all those things?
Sure. So to okay, I try to shoot from a different spot every night. Uh, if I'm going out for sunset, if I'm home and I'm going out for sunset, to get some air, get some exercise, walk along the river, and shoot sunset, I might walk from in Hoboken to the river, or I might drive to Jersey City or Weehawken or Bayonne or maybe Fort Lee up the river near the or Edgewater, I should say, up near the George Washington Bridge, and walk along the river in those places. Each spot, Jersey gives you a couple of things. Jersey's got about 15 vantage points from the George Washington Bridge in the north to Bayonne in the south. That's an area that's maybe 15 miles, maybe a little less in length, but there's probably 15 different good spots, each one with a different look of the New York skyline. And so, on any given night, I'll try and decide which one to go to, and um, and try to keep it different every night. Never go back to the same place 2 nights in a row is one of the things that I say. On sunsets and on sunrise, it's different because I'm trying to specifically line up the sun with a particular monument. So depending on the time of the year and where the sun is rising, I will, for example, tomorrow morning, I've already looked and decided that I want to do a sunrise tomorrow because I know it's going to be sunny from the south with the sun coming up over the Brooklyn and Manhattan bridges, shot from the south end of Jersey City. If I wanted to, I could shoot tomorrow the sunrise in Hoboken with the sun right behind the Empire State Building tomorrow. So I predetermine where I want to go by using an app or using software. There's a program that you can download for your computers called the Photographer's Ephemeris. It
Wait,
is
what's
really
that
nice to
again? It's
bring up.
the photographer's what?
Ephemeris is what it's called. Uh, Ephemeris. You can just search TPE on Google, and they have a desktop applet that you can load, and you can get a map of the city wherever you are, and it is 27 inches wide, and it has lines for the sunrise, sunset, moonrise, moonset, and and you can use the lines to figure out where you need to stand to get the sun going right behind, say, the Statue of Liberty or the Empire State Building or Lower Manhattan. And on my phone, I use an app called Photo Pills. Same principle, but it's in smaller form and you can't pinpoint it. That's it right there. The photographer's ephemeris. And if you scroll down, there's uh, an area that says for your desktop, and you click on something and it loads. Yeah, TPE for the web. And you put in where you are, and you can see what it looks like, and you put that red dot where you're standing, and you follow the lines out. The bottom has a time scale, so move the um, you can move the slider over to see where the sun will be 10 minutes later, 15 minutes later. Like the moon and the sun, you have to account for about 10 minutes, depending how far away from the skyline of New York you are, to see the sun come up on the horizon or behind a building. See there, it's moving the timeline, and with it,
Wow.
so do the lines move. The gray ones are the moon. The orange ones are the sun.
Wow,
The
that's
gray and the
pretty
blue are the
amazing.
moon. Yeah, and it's fantastic. You can plot every moonrise from now for the next 100 years on there. So, so for example, some of those moonrises that I told you about that I waited years for, I'll put that dot on the place I need to stand, and then I will go through month by month by month to see if that gray line, say, goes through the Empire State Building from that spot. And from the last time I shot that moon going up behind the Empire State Building with the houses in the foreground, I went out a year and a half, and it still didn't line up for the next year and a half after that picture was taken last fall. So not all these places come along very often, but when they do, you got to know it if that's what you want, right? Some of the more interesting and classic pictures. So,
what was the other app you were getting ready to talk about?
So there's a thing called Photo Pills, which is the exact same thing, but it's easier on the phone. The TPE app on the phone isn't that good. It's kind of clunky. I don't like it. But Photo Pills is the app everybody uses for their phone, and it's harder to pinpoint it's harder to pinpoint the exact spot to stand with a 2x2 inch screen on a telephone. So that's why I try to do everything on a desktop computer.
There's Photo Pills.
Photo Pills, that's the one. Yeah. So same principle. It's just good. This has so many features built into it. I can't figure it all out myself. It has augmented reality where you can hold the phone up and it'll give you the altitude of the sun, at what point it'll be, at what height of the building, at what time. So it's so cool if you can figure it out. I haven't really needed it. I don't really need augmented reality. I've been doing this long enough that I know about where the sun's going to be at any given time. And then my weather app is it's a professional app called Radar Scope, and it's just great. It's cheap. It's like $10 to buy. But the key thing about this weather app is you have to buy a $10 a year subscription for lightning. So if you don't buy the subscription, you see the storms coming, but they don't tell you which ones have lightning in them. And so
Did you say it was
$10?
Did you say it was Weather Scope or Radar Scope?
Radar Scope.
Radar Scope.
Radar Scope. And I use it on my phone, and it's just insanely accurate. Absolutely, a must-have for any photographer looking for up to the second weather information. So you can see in that center. Hold on a sec. You can see in that center picture, if I'm not mistaken, there's a bunch of Z's in the red, right? All those white marks. That's the lightning, and it shows you all those Z's. It shows you all those Z's in there.
Like up in the top in the computer screen.
Yeah, in the computer screen. Yeah.
Sorry, hang on. This is a little hard to navigate.
Yeah, it's okay. So all those white marks should be lightning, and so if you don't pay for the subscription, you don't get those white marks. You don't see the lightning. And it is so accurate that, again, it's not random to go out and get a lightning picture. You just have to know that there's lightning coming.
Let's see if I can.
And it's great because as the storm passes through, you know when to leave, minimizing your time. Focusing your time down to when you actually want to take the picture and not sitting out there waiting for it. There's no waiting at a press conference for the president to arrive 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour late. Nothing's late. So,
that's really interesting. So I'll try to get the links to those things put in the show notes after we're done here.
Yeah.
So you guys will have that for reference.
The other app I use is EarthCam. They're great. They're just webcams around the world. But there's about 10 of them. New York has more webcams than anywhere else. So I get an eastern view, a western view, a northwest, a southwest, southeast. I get all these views that, as the sun is rising or setting, I can look at these views all over the region, all over the area. And that's it, EarthCam. Yeah. And I can...
New York City. Well, I thought it was going to show us New York, but it didn't.
And this one, you pay $5 It gives you access to every webcam, and you pay $5 once. The app is free, but then you pay $5 for the access. And you pay $5 once.
Yeah, I'll try to get links up for all of these things.
Yeah, they really do help. They really, honest to goodness, truly help.
So you want to talk? I mean, were you able to cover anything else you want to talk about as far as like how you plan and how you find where you want to go?
No, that's really it. You know, the key is not going to the same place 2 days in a row unless the weather conditions warrant going back to a place that you were at yesterday. That's always possible. And it's just that I live in an area where I'm blessed with so many, like I told you earlier, so many iconic monuments to place in the picture to give it context and time and place.
Well, here's actually a good question that came from the comments from Mansour Ahmad. Do you have any advice on shooting the moon in a city where there aren't so famous landmarks?
Yeah, get on a plane and come to New York. No, look, you can shoot the moon in every city. There's something in every city. There's something, a way to photograph the moon. The key in photographing the moon is to be in a position where you can photograph the moon coming up on the horizon. That's the beauty that we have of going, whether it's 5 miles, 7 miles, 13 or 25 miles away. You see the moon quicker behind the city. If you are somewhere where you have to wait for the moon to clear an obstacle, a mountain or a hill, or if you have to photograph it coming up over buildings, and the longer you wait, the more likely the moon's going to be white on a night that the moon is full. So my tip to everybody, if you're photographing the moon with some kind of obstacle in front of you, is you always want to photograph it at the top of the obstacle. And it might mean that you photograph it a day or 2 days before it's full, so that its arrival at the height that you want to photograph it at it coincides with the same time the sun is disappearing in the sky. You're always trying to balance, you're always trying to find a spot to shoot the moon no matter where you are, so that you're photographing it as the sun is going down behind you.
My advice to that question is that there's always some kind of landmark, regardless of where you are, whether it's a tree or an old barn or a building of some kind. So you can always, I think, anywhere you are, find some kind of foreground element that you can put in the frame to put in front of the moon or the sun or whatever.
If you're on the water, you can put a boat.
Excuse me.
Something. There's always something.
Okay, so you want to talk a little bit about social media? Well, so how much time do you actually invest in all this? Now, I know like you have a full-time job, and a lot of people think that you just spend all day plotting this out. So how much time actually goes into your planning? Because we know. Okay, we're up to a total of like 30 seconds of post-production. So how much pre-production goes into it?
Maybe 2 minutes. Like for example, this afternoon I sat down with the TPE app up, and I said, okay, where am I going to shoot sunrise tomorrow? And I look at it and I see the alignment of the typical places that you can stand to see the Empire State Building, and it's right here in Hoboken. I've done that so many times, I don't really want to do it. Then I put the marks in a place to see how the sun rises behind the World Trade Center. And I have to be in Liberty State Park to do that. It's closed, because of COVID, so I can't do that. Go farther down the river and see what it looks like over the bridges. Oh, it lines up this weekend exactly over the bridges, and so that's where I want to go. A few weeks ago, from the same spot I'm going to shoot from tomorrow, it lined up behind the Statue of Liberty. But as you know, the sun rises a minute to the north every day now as we approach June 21st. So what might be good today isn't good 4 days from now, because it rises a little bit farther to the left. So it's just a matter of just in your head thinking about, look at the different monuments, put that orange line on the monument, and see if there is a potential way to shoot it with the sun rising behind it. So it really takes a couple of minutes. That's all. It's literally 2 minutes, and I had decided what I was going to shoot tomorrow.
And really using those apps, like you could go, like let's say you're on vacation and you're in Paris or
Right.
San Francisco or wherever, and you want to do some nice landscape images, you can take those apps and they work from anywhere.
Anywhere, absolutely anywhere. Yep.
So we're getting some good questions from the audience now. So and actually a couple of them are kind of like right where I was going next. So why don't you talk a little bit about how long it took you to get up to 80,000 followers on Instagram, and kind of some of the things you did to accelerate that process?
Okay. Well. Okay. Yeah. I mean, we could have a whole other show on social media.
Exactly. So give us the 5 minutes or less version.
Okay. So I'll go quickly through social media. I have 3 social media platforms that I pay attention to: Instagram, Twitter, and a Facebook page, a Facebook business page. Right? Not my Facebook personal timeline, but I have a Gary Hershorn photography. So when I'm out shooting a picture and I get something I like a moonrise, I will post to Instagram first. Once I post to Instagram, that creates a JPEG file of my post and saves it on my phone. And then I take that file and I post it to Twitter right away. So Instagram and Twitter are being done, one after the other. Whatever you do, don't link your account so that if you post to Instagram, it automatically posts to Twitter, because the picture doesn't post to Twitter, a link posts to Twitter. You don't actually see the picture.
Right.
Twitter blocked Instagram from posting actual photographs on its platform. And then, I usually wait maybe an hour or so, and I go home, and then I post to Facebook sometime shortly after that. Because mostly, I try to keep it to a single picture on Instagram. Sometimes it's 3 pictures on Twitter, depending on what I'm photographed. And usually on Facebook, it might be 4 pictures from something rather than just a single picture. So I tend to do my Facebook posts a little later, but Instagram and Twitter are right away, as fast as I can.
So you've got that you've got that journalist mentality. So it's like first to the wire, right? First to Instagram,
right?
Wins.
I think everybody knows I have 81,000 followers on Instagram, and I have 9,500 on Twitter. And they're different audiences. Every audience on each platform is different. I can guarantee you that most of the people that follow me on Instagram don't follow me on Twitter. And most of the people that follow me on Twitter don't follow me on Instagram. They're different worlds. Twitter is more of a news platform, right? So I find that, who follows me on Twitter? A lot of friends, a lot of journalists, a lot of meteorologists, people like Maggie Haberman. I love Maggie Haberman and she's a New Yorker with 1.5 million followers on Twitter. And she'll retweet me all the time. And it's just the best, because your audience just goes by leaps and bounds when someone like Maggie retweets you. So the one thing to know about Instagram is it says that there are 81,500 followers, but it's a fallacy. How did I get to 81,500? Instagram used to have this thing called suggested followers, so that if you were lucky enough to get on their suggested follower list, which meant that if I was a non-Instagram user logging in for the first time, you would get a page of suggestions from them of people to follow. And people would go follow every one of them. So if you got on the list, you got on the list for 14 days, and it was good for about 5,000 followers a day. So I got on the list twice years ago, which is how I got up to where I got up into the high 60s or something, and then.
And was there anything? I mean, what got you on that list? How did you get there?
People at Instagram who found you or knew you. People in the business who were working at Instagram, whether it was Pamela Chen or other people that knew who you were from your news days, and so, but they're not what I would call quality follows. People that engage with you, or people that like your pictures. People may follow you, but they never like your pictures. So what's going on now is, and what's more critical to know is, I've converted my Instagram account from a personal account to a business account. And you do that by linking your Instagram account to your Facebook account, your Facebook page account. So Gary Hershorn Photography. And so that gives you access to an analytics that are within the Instagram account called Insights. And I can follow my pictures now and see what kind of reach they get. And what's more important than knowing how many followers you have is knowing how many of the followers that you have actually see the pictures that you post. So I can tell you on average, when I post a picture, only about 7 to 8,000 on a good day see the pictures that I post of the 81,000 people, because Facebook doesn't deliver them to 81,000 people. And why don't they deliver them to 81,000 people? Because they want me to boost the post by paying them money. And that's like the dirty little secret in social media. You can't reach all your followers. So it's really important. For me, it's really important to know how many followers I have and how many people actually see it. And as a photographer who's posting, everybody wants to get likes, right? We all want to be, like have thousands and thousands of likes. But you can't get thousands and thousands of likes unless you pay for more people to see your pictures. And I don't pay. I won't pay.
I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you if you do pay for any of those boosted posts.
I don't. I get hit by a barrage of ads from and notifications from Facebook, both on Facebook and Instagram, to boost. We all see sponsored posts, right? If you go through your Instagram feed, there'll be a nice picture and it'll say sponsored. Somebody's boosted their post. They want more people to see it. They're hoping that if thousands more people see it, those people will follow you. I've never boosted a post, and I've never tried to boost a post. And one of the things, one of the magic numbers that we always talked about on Instagram was 10% likes to your followers, right? And that used to be really nice. That was a really great thing. 10% likes, so if you have 1,000 followers and you got 100 likes, you're doing extremely well. And so in my case, it's 10% likes to the number of people that see the picture. So I don't get 10% likes to followers. That would be 8,000 likes. And the highest picture I ever had on Instagram was about 4,000 likes, 4,200 likes. So because I've switched to the business account and I get these analytical insights, I can see that my percentage ratio of likes to number of people seeing the picture is about 10 to 12%. And that makes me happy. So if I see a picture has 500 likes, I'm pretty sure if I go look at the analytics, 5,000 people saw that picture. And it usually is exactly that number. So those are, some of the dirty little secrets that nobody, will tell you at Instagram that's going on. They don't want you to have widespread distribution to your followers and your community when you surpass a certain number of people that follow you, because then they put you in a different category and want you to pay to reach those people.
And does that have anything more to do with having a business account versus a personal account?
It probably does. I think it does. I don't know for a fact, but I think I see more messages from Facebook to boost my content because it is a business account.
Mm-hmm.
And most businesses that are on Facebook are paying to have advertising. Look at their revenues. Facebook revenues have record revenues of billions and billions of dollars every quarter. That's why their stock keeps going up, because so many people are paying to advertise and boost like that on their social platforms.
Interesting.
But I love Twitter.
No, do you do any? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, of the platforms, I think the one that I like the best actually is Twitter, because it's a really nice feeling when a picture you post takes off. Like say the rainbow picture last week, when all of a sudden, you normally get 100 likes on Twitter. And Twitter's not a platform where very many people actually like things. Like, how many people actually like a post on Twitter? Every once in a while you do, but it's not ingrained in you as a user of Twitter to like something as it is on Facebook and Instagram. So that rainbow picture got a lot of likes because it got a lot of retweets. And that's what I like about Twitter. They allow retweets. You can't do that on Instagram unless you have a third party, piece of software and repost it. So
Right.
nobody reposts other people's work, but everybody retweets other people's work. And I love Twitter for that.
Have you given any thought to that court ruling that came down last week where the photographer had sued Mashable over embedding an Instagram image into an article on the Mashable site? And Mashable had actually reached out to the photographer and asked for permission to use the image, and the photographer had denied them. Well, the photographer asked to be paid, and Mashable declined to pay them. So what Mashable did is they went to Instagram because whether you know this or not, the terms of agreement is when you post something to Instagram, you also give them rights to sublease the images. And so Mashable went to Instagram and got permission from Instagram to embed the Instagram link in the article. And so they were able to kind of get around the copyright rules by doing that. And the photographer sued, and it went to the Supreme Court. And actually the Supreme Court sided with Mashable on it. So now what photographers need to know is that anytime you post something to Instagram, becomes a co-copyright holder with you, and they have the right to sell your images or to allow someone else to use them.
Yeah, they don't sell them, but they
do have the rights. They do have the rights to authorize someone else to use the image through the Instagram. As an embed. Yeah. Embed being the key thing. It's not that they took the image or screen grabbed the image. They embedded the direct link to the Instagram feed, so it came up as the Instagram post, and the judge ruled that the photographer had made it public, and by the terms of service with the Instagram agreement, that Instagram was authorized to allow that usage, and so the photographer lost.
I'm well aware of everything from work, on how this all works and why it's there, and the terms and conditions, both from a photographer and a publisher. And there isn't a news organization anywhere in the world that isn't embedding pictures from social media every day.
I was going to say, I would think you would have a good perspective on this, but because as a picture editor at Fox News, you're also a gatherer of images, so to speak. So you do have to reach out and obtain images from time to time.
Yeah. So I don't, for the life of me, understand why this became such a big deal because of the court ruling. Because prior to that ruling, it was being done for years. So what happened on that day was the judge said what they're doing is legal, right? But they've been doing it for years. Why didn't people complain about this for all the years that the platforms existed leading up to this one court decision?
Well, honestly, honestly, I think there's been a little misinformation about the whole thing, because I know I have seen on Facebook and other places, it'll go around every so often, like any of those internet myths that go around from time to time. You'll see something that says, well, Facebook has changed or Instagram has changed their terms of service, and now they're gonna do a rights grab, and they're gonna claim ownership of any images that you post to that platform. And that'll go around, and everybody will get up in arms and say, oh, well, I don't authorize Facebook to use my images or Instagram to use my images, and they'll pull images off. And then somebody will come out and they'll say, oh, well, that's just a farce. That's not really what it says. And the fact is just nobody bothers to read the terms of agreement.
Nobody reads.
So nobody really knows. But so it's true that's always been there, but there's so much misinformation that goes around about it. How do you know what's right and what's wrong?
So
I guess you got to read the terms for yourself.
My pictures have been embedded for years. I've been on social media for years, going back to 2012, and my pictures have been embedded for years. When I go and put a picture on Twitter of the rainbow or a lightning strike or something like that, I'm as likely to find that picture inside a story in the New York Times or the Daily Mail or something like that, that's doing a story on the weather that blasted across Manhattan last night. And would I like those people to go to Getty and buy the picture? Yeah, I would. I would much prefer that. But and most do, I will say. And for every one embed there is of a lightning picture, there's a lot more sales of that picture through Getty. So as a photographer in today's world, you got to find some middle ground. There's a benefit to having your work in social media and people seeing it, to know that it exists and that it can be bought should people want to license it. And I use the social media in a way of trying to advertise what I'm doing. And I'm sure people are stealing it. You know, do I care if somebody retweets it? No. Do I care if the Washington Post chooses to embed a picture from my Twitter feed? I like I said, I prefer they bought it, you know, but if they don't, at least they have embedded into that story a Twitter frame from my Twitter account, so that if somebody clicks on the picture, it comes to my feed, and I might get a new follower out of that. You know, that's how you grow your following. So you have to somehow find a middle ground between being happy that you distribute content through an agency that's selling, with building up a feed so that more people see it, with accepting that an embed can be an advertisement for what you do, and somewhere down the road you will benefit from more people having access to what you do.
Well, let me ask you this. So you have a job, you have a full-time job, and so this is just sort of your what did the millennials call it now, like a side gig or a side hustle. So so the landscape thing is kind of like your millennial version of a side hustle. And so really any money that you make off of the stuff that you're doing in your free time is sort of beer money, as we say. Right. Now, if you are doing this full time, not necessarily just the cityscape stuff, but let's say that you were solely, like, you were a freelancer or a contractor or whatever, and you were purely were earning your primary income with your camera, do you think you would feel any different about that?
No. And look, I went through a period in 2016 and part of 2017 where I was straight freelancer, and I didn't change my tactics at all from the previous job I was doing at Flipboard with Steve Fine, to being a freelancer, to getting a job. And you know, a salary job. In that time frame, I was a freelancer, and I was doing exactly the same thing, distributing through Getty, being a contributor to them. Happy to be a contributor, happy to have an agency like Getty behind me pushing this stuff out to the world. I get into a lot of discussions about why I don't sell this stuff, for example, on my own website, you know, a photo shelter site that I have, and why do I give it to Getty? Why do I choose to sell pictures at what Getty sells things at, compared to what you could sell pictures yourself off your website and keep 100% of the sale? My answer is always the same. Volume is better than one-off sales.
Right.
Nobody's coming to GaryHershorn.com to buy a picture.
Right.
The world is going to Getty Images.
Well, you might be shortchanging yourself though now, but that you've got 80,000 Instagram following.
Well, it's there, and I can sell prints off it. And I made my second print sale yesterday. That's it. There's not a big market for prints, you know.
Right, but I get it. I get it. When somebody goes to the Getty site and they type in New York City landscapes or New York City skyline, 100 Gary Hershorn images are going to come up, and and they're not going to they're going to go to Getty because it's going to be fast and easy for them to find pictures there.
Exactly.
They're not going to go to the Gary Hershorn website specifically because it's just easier for them to find what they need at a one-stop shop like a Getty.
Exactly. So the side hustle that you said becomes a monumental side hustle in trying to promote your own site as a source of images to potential clients, and that's hard. That's a really hard thing.
Right.
And so I preferred when I was 100% freelancing to use social media as a mechanism to get my name and keep my name out there, because I was no longer putting pictures, say, on Reuters. And before I started contributing to Getty, I was contributing to Corbis, before Getty bought Corbis or took control of Corbis. And you know, Corbis wasn't selling anything. Nobody was going to Corbis to buy anything in their last days. But it was a good place, you know, just to keep a collection together. But nothing sold.
Right.
Getty sells pictures. They're in a business to sell pictures, and they sell them well. So volume is a big deal to me.
Well, that actually kind of takes me into the next question, and you're going to know a little bit about this person asking it. But Mike Sargent wants to know, what other ways do you monetize your project besides just the Getty arrangement and book sales? But let's talk a little bit about stock sales and Getty and how you get affiliated there. And actually, let me ask you this. Like, I know you said you get some pretty decent checks out of the stock sales. What's what's your, for example, Richard Ellis, who you know, was actually probably one of the creators of the whole Getty stock services. We know, Richard gets a pretty substantial check from Getty every month, but he's got a personal library of over 100,000 images on Getty. So there's a lot of volume on there to choose from. So like, what's the size of your library that you have on Getty? And then can you talk a little bit about how you got into that and how you kind of nurse that and feed that and derive some income from it?
Yeah, absolutely. At the moment, I have about just over 12,000 pictures in Getty. And it grows every day. I add 5, 6, 10 pictures almost every day to them, because whatever I put on Instagram, I put 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 on Instagram in a multiple post. I'll give Getty as a ratio. If I put 1 on Instagram, Getty gets about 8 to 10. If I put 4 on Instagram, Getty gets probably 12 to 16 pictures from that shoot. They're fabulous to work with. They take the pictures. It goes through their editorial desk. They're really, really good people to file to, and they understand the news value in some of these pretty pictures, and the stuff gets out there. I was a Corbis contributor. Corbis moved over to Getty, and I was invited by Pancho Bernasconi to continue on contributing to the editorial desk at Getty. And I couldn't have been happier, and I accepted the offer right away. And I have a little niche. One of the great things about Getty is there's really not that many people, if anybody, consistently putting pictures of New York City into their library on the editorial side. Yes, their staff photographers do when they have a specific assignment, or there might be a super moon and they'll hire a freelancer, or a staffer will go out and shoot the moon, right? But I'll also contribute my stuff to them also.
But also your images sort of conform to the editorial style, because there's not a lot of heavy post-production, because I'm sure they have images in the library that are heavily post-processed and probably composite images where people are shooting the moon and they're and that was one of the things I wanted to talk about on when we're talking about social media. So you were telling me that story about the one particular Instagrammer who posted an image from a storm with a rainbow, but it wasn't from the storm that you guys were actually So that's that's one thing. I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that's one thing about your feed is your feed has some there's some real journalistic integrity to it, because it is images that are captured in the camera. There's no post production. It's real moments. It's real moments in time. So it conforms to all those editorial constraints.
Yes, and if you're an editor, or you're somebody looking at what I do on Getty, for example, and you're buying from Getty and you see the content that's there, and if you go to my Instagram feed and it looks different, the first thing that's going to come up into your head is which is real and which isn't, right? So for me, because I'm in the editorial space, I have to keep the look of the picture on Getty equal to the look of the picture on Instagram. They have to match up, which is don't do anything to the pictures. I don't want to leave myself open to having the work that I have in Getty questioned for its authenticity. I want everyone to realize that is what it is, and the same thing goes on Instagram. So they match up, very well, and I think that's really important. You can't fool anybody. The Instagram platform was made for people to fool everybody. That is the key thing on Instagram, in my opinion, is it's not authentic, and unless you're following known journalists or people that that maybe have a blue check mark or something, that are to be trusted in what they post, you have to be careful with what you see. And what happens is, you were just saying, I was out 2 days ago photographing a storm over New York, and I was hoping for a rainbow. There was another photographer there who I'm sure we were hoping for lightning and a rainbow. And there was no rainbow at the end of the storm, and there was hardly any lightning. But I noticed that a picture was posted that said after the storm. That's all it said. But what it didn't say was that the picture was taken a year previous. And if you back through the person's Instagram feed, you'll find it on April 16th, 2019. Basically the same picture. And
Yeah.
what gives it away is the building in the picture that's under construction is now finished. Like, do people think that, well, people do think that you won't notice. Because if you read the comments in the picture, you'll see great picture, right place at the right time, but what the person didn't say was great picture, right place at the right time last year.
Exactly. I mean, it's funny.
Right.
I mean, nobody looks at Instagram that way, really. I don't think anybody goes into Instagram expecting there to be any kind of authenticity to it. But I mean, man, there really are some pixel peepers out there who have
Right.
who have gone into. I can't remember I know there have been some news pictures in the last like 5 to 10 years where people have really gone down and dug into the pixels and found the cloning, and photographers have gotten fired and lost jobs over it at news organizations for altering pictures or cloning or removing distracting elements and things like that. So yeah, I mean, there are people who will find that, but I mean, honestly, I don't think anybody goes to Instagram kind of looking for that level of authenticity. So I really applaud you for pursuing that in your work.
Thank you.
But I didn't mean to sidetrack you. So let's jump back to the
keep it real. It's all about keeping it real.
Exactly. I mean, it has more. I think when the pictures are real, there's more meaning to them. They're more meaningful. They're more impactful.
There's so much real beauty out in the world that we live in. You just have to go get it. You don't create it. You just have to go get it. And if it means you go out 7 nights in a row for a sunset to get the one picture you want on the 7th night, so be it.
But then you got but then you have those folks who will go out there 7 days and they'll get the sunset on one day, they'll get the Brooklyn Bridge on another day, they'll get the Statue of Liberty on another day, and then on the 5th day they'll sit down and they'll tie all those things together and put it together.
Right.
Whereas what you're doing is you're getting it right in the viewfinder to begin with.
Right. That's the key. And it's possible. And I like to think that the product that I produce is living proof that it's possible to go out and photograph this stuff in one frame and get it there in front of you.
Oh, absolutely. You're a testament to it. I mean, my gosh.
So, so as far as we were talking about monetizing,
hang on. I mean, just looking at that picture, just getting that picture in one frame. I mean, amazing. It's exactly what we're talking about.
Moon comes up. You just got to be there when that happens. The moon comes up. That's what it looks like from that distance with that lens. So
anyway, I didn't mean to distract you.
No,
so
let's
go back to the Getty arrangement. How to get hooked up with Getty and how you're able to drive a little bit of income off of what you're doing.
Getty is look, you get invited. I was invited. The editorial people who are career-long friends of mine gave me a break when I was free after Reuters, and I started contributing to them. So, forever in debt to the great people that work there, and very appreciative of it. And so that's one outlet. I have used my Instagram feed as a portfolio. So, how do you monetize it? You hope that photo editors are going to look at what you do and invite you to come and do something for them. The great Bob Martin, who runs the photo operation at Wimbledon, for example, invited me to come to Wimbledon in 2006 to try and create my look on Instagram at Wimbledon for the club. So that's a way you are monetizing what you're doing with your Instagram feed. You're using it to present your work in a way that people might actually want to hire you to do something for them. There's miscellaneous print sales here or there, but they don't amount to anything. It's not really a big business, in my opinion. And if you put together enough of a body of work, maybe somebody like Warren Winter will come along and invite you to do a book and put that out. So, it's just trying to be consistent and show the world to people through the social media platforms.
So when you're going out, are you trying to stay relevant? Are you trying to I know like one thing like Richard's approach is that he goes out and he tries to stay relevant with the news. So he goes out every day and he tries to make pictures that are comparable to what he's seeing on the front pages of the newspapers. Are you trying to kind of incorporate some of that into what you're doing?
Yeah. So absolutely. So if you go through the pictures that I have on Getty, you will see pictures that match whatever the week's kind of story is.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I know that there are certain things that sell well. Pictures of airplanes sell well because the airlines are, when it comes to companies that screw up more than other companies, the airlines are number one. So if you have pictures of United and American and JetBlue and whatever in Getty, it's not going to be long before United does something stupid like drag somebody off the plane or kill a pet or whatever. And there are going to be stories all over the place, and people are going to go to Getty and they're going to type in United Airlines, and I want my pictures to come up first. So one of the things that I do quite repetitively is refresh all the editorial stock that I know is going to be sold regularly. Keep it fresh. You always want to be on the first page of a search, and the easiest way to do that is to have fresh material. And one of the things that you find more than anything when you look at sales reports from editorial sales or stock editorial sales is that the vast majority of them are pictures taken in the last month. So if I am giving pictures of the New York skyline to Getty every week, they're selling, or every few days, they're selling because they're the newest. There's the newest pictures, and publications always want today's picture or yesterday's picture for tomorrow's paper. They don't want last month's picture for tomorrow's newspaper.
Now I know you said that, like, and I from what you said, I gathered it's kind of like more a personal thing, where you just like being first to Twitter, you like being first to Instagram from a given sort of celestial event or something involving the skyline or the city or whatever it is that you're out there doing. And so as a result, because you are posting so fast to to social media, do you ever generate any sales just specifically off of the quick turnaround that you're doing?
Yes, there are. I will constantly get, like everybody on social media, hey, I'm a photo editor at NBC or ABC. We'd love to use your picture across all our platforms in perpetuity. And the answer is always, no, you can't. You go to Getty and buy it. And they do. They actually go and do. Once they hear it's in Getty, it's great. Oh, we didn't know you were Getty. We didn't know you were a Getty contributor. We'll go get it from Getty.
So how fast are you getting stuff to Getty? I mean, obviously not from the street. You're not doing that.
No, I don't file for them to the street. When I file to them, it really depends on the set of pictures I have. Whether I feel like I've got a good picture that might actually get selected for their top picks selection, which is a nice gallery to be in every day.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the times I'll go out and shoot, the skyline, and it's 100% stock. There's no instant news value in it. So I give it to them as what they call a non-live submission. It probably gets put to their site the next day, and that's fine because it's just pure stock. And then if you go out and you shoot a supermoon, you want to give it to them as a live submission because you want to see that stuff. The interest in the moon is so high that newspapers and media outlets are looking for those pictures right away. So sometimes I might carry a laptop with me and file right from where I was shooting, every once in a while, depending on the importance of what it is that the celestial event that I'm out photographing.
So if I was just kind of getting started with stock or thinking about stock, beginning photographer, trying to build a portfolio or a personal library of stock images, or maybe you're an established photographer and you've already got a pretty good sized portfolio of work. What advice would you have for them to kind of get started in doing something like with Getty? Or I know there's other agencies out there as well. In fact, I don't even think Richard is selling his stuff through Getty. I think he sells his stuff through Alamy or something, something
there's
like
a lot
that.
Of agencies, Alamy,
yeah. So, what advice do you have for somebody to get started? Yeah, I mean, it used to be like it used to be stock before the Getty days. and when the days of the photo agencies, I mean, people could really like just do stock photography full time, and they could earn a full time living off of it. I mean, it's certainly much more difficult to do it now.
The whole world of stock has changed. I'm not in the stock world. I'm lucky to be on the editorial desk, so I'm still completely in the world of journalism as a contributing photojournalist with Getty. My content could be labeled editorial stock, but it's not sold through the stock channels. It's sold through the editorial channels that the New York Times or the NBC News or ABC News would normally go to buy pictures from. Getty, in fact, there used to be stock would be designated rights free or royalty free or rights managed. Rights managed was the creative stuff that everybody wanted to. All these stock photographers wanted to get their pictures into that rights managed collection, because if you were Citibank or you were Wells Fargo and you were looking for a picture for an ad, you might buy a picture for $10,000 or $20,000 out of a rights managed collection, right? And you would get exclusivity to the image, and you'd get a national ad campaign out of it, and that picture would be pulled out of circulation for the length of your campaign so nobody else could use it. And there was a lot of money in that. That market has dried up so far that Getty basically ended the rights managed group recently, and they're giving all the photographers their work back who had content in the rights managed. It's now royalty free. And what's the difference? Royalty free is maybe a $10 sale, $15, $20 sale, and and it is a way for these big companies to buy pictures at a much cheaper rate, and they're not as concerned about. There's so many more images out there in the world. They're less interested in the exclusivity that they once were, when all this high quality, beautiful rights managed content was created. But the stock world the stock world at Getty exists at iStock, not within Getty itself, really. iStock is their big, huge stock agency to the masses, like Shutterstock is. And now there's Adobe Stock, and there's Alamy, and Mike Sargent just put up a note there that said Shutterfly is now into stock and taken on Getty in that stock world. And
I should point out that Mike Sargent is the former executive vice president of the Getty editorial division. Yeah. So Mike would have some insight on this.
Yeah, Mike and I, when I was at Reuters, Mike and I would try to have lunch, every month. We'd meet for lunch so that we could kind of size up the competition every month. It's what we did back in those days. Before we had WhatsApp to talk to each other, we had to actually go have lunch together. So which was quite good. But there are so many other agencies. There's Stocksy is a big one, Caven Images. There's so many places that are trying to sell high quality stock at a reduced rate. Not at the, when I say a reduced rate, I don't mean they're trying to sell it not at $10,000 a picture, but maybe $100, $125 a picture, which is still a pretty good price for a stock picture these days. When you consider that I have a contributors account to Shutterstock, and I gave them a few pictures here and there when I was at Corbis, and those pictures sell, and I get a 25-cent royalty on them, and that's really what's typical in the stock world. So, if you're a young photographer and you're really interested in stock, you have to go to iStock, Shutterstock, online and apply to be a contributor. And they ask you to send in like 10 or 20 pictures, and they approve you or reject you. And if they approve you, you then get an account, and you can then start uploading as much as you want into their system. The difference with stock is all stock pictures go through an approval process. So you might send in 50 pictures and they pick 10 and reject the other 40. That's part of the stock world. And I don't quite understand it. It's not like storage is expensive. Why not keep them all? If a photographer goes to the extent of cropping, toning, captioning, keywording, giving you the image, and you say, well, we don't really need it, might as well take it. What does it cost you to store it?
Exactly.
But that's the way the stock agencies work.
So, so just to kind of recap a little bit, so as far as monetizing your project and what you're doing, it's mostly stock sales from Getty, some book sales. I would assume probably the book sales is lags behind the stock sales, or how has the book sales been? Yeah. And you said some print sales.
Some I've set up my website to do prints, but depending on the size and whether you want metallic or canvas or this or that, is what drives the price. But most people go to the site and buy an 8x10 for $15 or whatever.
So have you found any other ways that you're monetizing what you're doing?
No, not at all.
So the stock sales are key.
Yeah, the sales out of Getty are definitely the most interesting part of everything that I do.
So I think I've actually already talked to Richard. I think I'm going to have Richard on
that'd be great.
One of these shows just to kind of talk about how the whole stock thing works, because Richard engineered a lot of it. So
yes, he did.
He was a big dog back in his Getty days.
He certainly was. Yeah. Along with Mike.
Yeah, Mike as well. So I'm not getting any more questions, so I think we can wrap this up. We're going on 3 hours now, so we have eclipsed the Doug Mills episode. Now, 15 minutes of that is the opening slideshow, but we're pretty far up there. So any parting words?
Get out there and take pictures, especially now, if you can, get out for 5 minutes and, you're not too worried about, coronavirus. There's a way to social distance, look at your community, see where you can go. One of the things that I'm trying to do more than anything right now is I'm picking spots, for sunset, not for sunrise. Sunrise is very specific to line up the sun, because the sun rises behind the city. I need to pick a spot where it comes up in front of something. But with sunset, I'm trying to pick spots where I can drive my car to and basically shoot a picture within 5 feet of the car. And one of the things that, Mike said he meant Shutterstock, not Shutterfly. One of the things that, like I say, I'm trying to do is I'm social distancing. I'm trying never to get close to anybody. It's really nice to be able to, in Jersey, one of the greatest things about shooting these pictures from Jersey is between Bayonne and the George Washington Bridge, there's endless free parking. Endless free parking. The key to the photographing New York City, and why photographing New York City from Jersey is better than photographing New York City from Brooklyn or Queens.
Come on, all the meter, all the parking enforcement, they've been, they're still essential. So I'm sure they're out there ticketing cars, but man,
probably. But there is
what a bummer it would be to get a parking ticket right now.
There literally are places to park where it's 2-hour parking with no meters, all up and down the Hudson River on the Jersey side. And rarely am I feeding a meter to pay for parking. So, and the beauty also is you can park almost next to the river in many places, so that you quite literally walk 5 feet from your car, take a picture, get back in your car. So you're not putting yourself out there in the middle of anybody, and it's very safe.
Right. Well, look, man, I appreciate it. I appreciate all your time and patience. I mean, when I conceived this idea, I mentioned in the show I did with Doug, I actually had been thinking about doing this kind of a show for a long time, and I originally thought about doing it as a podcast. Right. And going into this year, it was an Olympics year, an election year, and I thought how cool it would be to be able to talk to people from out in the field and kind of let people know what it's actually like on the daily grind when you're out covering a campaign or you're out at the Olympics. But you were definitely one of the top 3 folks I had on my list for wanting to get on here, because I just love you and admire all the work that you do, and the Instagram stuff just blows me away. And so I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and talk about all this stuff. And hopefully, we'll be able to have you back sometime, and hopefully you're not talked out, and you'll have some new images and when this is all over. But I also want to, nobody is encouraging people to just grab their cameras and go out of their houses and put themselves at risk and put others at risk. Right. Because don't forget, when you go out and put yourself at risk, it's not just you, it's everybody you come into contact with. It's your wife or your parents or your family or whoever. And so, as Gary said early on, photojournalists have been deemed essential personnel. And so photojournalists need to be out there doing the work and documenting this. And it really does need to be a visual history of what's going on right now. So Gary, I want to like really encourage you to kind of keep at it and kind of think about the big picture, you know, about the historic record of what this time in our lives and what this time in our history is going to mean long term. So, you know, keep it up. I know you're going to keep up those beautiful cityscapes. It's just magic, you know, every time I see a picture from you. So I appreciate it. And so, guys, we're going to close on this. And so check back. We're going to have another show with Doug Mills one day next week. I think it's going to be on Tuesday. Don't hold me to that because it's really dependent on Doug's schedule at the White House. But Doug is going to come back on. We had so many questions about his remote camera setup, how he sets up the remote cameras. He's using a lot of remote cameras at the White House now because they are assigned positions. So it's not like he can go in the briefing room and choose where he wants to go now. He has to stand in one specific spot. And so to get around that, he's setting up like 3 to 4 remote cameras around the room to get different angles and to be able to cover different aspects of what's going on. And so when we did the show last week, and if you haven't seen it, really go back and look at it because there is a fascinating behind the scenes tour that he gives us of the briefing room using his phone. And it was really, really like fascinating. But we did get a lot of questions about the remote camera setup. So Doug has very generously agreed to come back again, and he's going to go through the whole setup from ground up, how he wires a camera up, how he places it, where he stands, how he fires it, and then how he gets the pictures out of the camera and gets them up to the New York Times literally within seconds of capture. So that's going to be a really good show. We're going to come back. We're going to talk to Matt Mendelson about his really special senior portraits project that he's doing with kids at Yorktown High School in Arlington. He's going to photograph all 500 of them, and he tells each kid's unique story. So it's a very different approach from sort of the typical portrait photographer that's going out and doing the portraits. So it's really worth your time. And Matt is just a smart, brilliant guy, and he really knows pictures, and he's just a fascinating person to talk to. So looking forward to that. And so with that, guys, we're going to close out. Thanks for watching. Thanks for coming to The Real Picture. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, leave us some comments. Love you guys. Appreciate it. The Real Picture. See you next time.